Hey, welcome to the stream. We've got not much of a plan today, but we are streaming, so it's going to be... Well, I'm not sure what it's going to be. We'll be looking at a video to start of a philosophy debate, modern philosophy debate, contemporary modern philosophy debate on the internet, and it's a little interesting, and I kind of wanted to revisit it myself to see what's going on here, but that's going to be in a moment. First, I'm going to prepare a little bit of tea for myself, listen to some of my own music, as I like to do, sort of gather myself as we start. I've got a Mishan Shuishan. Mi Shang. I don't know what that means. Mi Xiang Shuishan. Rock Oolong tea. I'm gonna drink 4 grams of it today. Four and a half grams today. Yeah. Okay, cool. Tea ready. So let's check this out. Again, I'm very excited, but also very unsure about this process. However, it is a Twitch streamer, a debater, and he knows a little bit about philosophy, and he's debating another person who also knows about philosophy. And they're debating in a very strange, new, interesting way. High-level topics. We'll all see together. Let's
So what do you
jump
want,
in.
Graham? What am I running away from?
Well, I even said I never said you were running away. People in my chat were saying that. I don't know.
Why
I'm
were
not
they
watching
saying
your
that?
stream.
I'm interested. Why were they saying that?
I don't know. I guess you'd have to ask them.
So can you go come back and explain some of the claims you've been saying about me tonight that I've been hearing about?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what claims specifically?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. What did you make? What did you say about me?
Oh, I've said a lot. Oh, wait. 1 sec. I just have to adjust my volume levels.
Go ahead.
We can already tell the debate is starting off very well. Quite hostile between, well, seemingly from one person at the moment, but and the chat also. We'll try to ignore the chat for a bit.
No, like
Is there more?
I've said a lot of things tonight. I can't. You'd have to. Can you give me specific examples?
Okay, what would be a relevant point of debate?
What would
would
you
be a
say?
relative point of contention
What'd you say, Ren?
to debate about?
Oh, we could discuss the ethics of incest.
When have I spoken about incest?
I never said you did, but
So
it's
tell
a topic
me
today.
what are you saying about me?
What?
You said you don't believe I mastered Hegel at 19?
Oh well, yeah, I know you didn't.
Oh, how is that?
Okay, okay. You love incest. Okay, well, that's very strange. But okay, I'm happy for you. All right, we're not going to be talking about incest. We're going to talk about Hegel, apparently. Hegel.
Just because I know about the difficulty of Hegel and the prerequisites required. I mean, there's not much of a debate here to be had.
No, I think there's actually a debate here to be had. So
Sounds like there's a debate here to be had. Maybe. Can somebody master Hegel? Hegel's a person. He's a philosopher, an old philosopher. Can somebody master Hegel at a young age? That's the thing in contention, I think, at the moment.
on the basis of the difficulties of Hegel, which are not under dispute, and the requirements of mastering Hegel's system, which I'm not sure you would be aware of because I don't even think you've ever claimed you've mastered Hegel's system, so I don't even know how you would fucking know. How do you know for a fact that I didn't master Hegel's system at 19? Go ahead.
I guess I can't know for definitive.
You can't. You really can't. So why don't you just shut the fuck up about it and stop telling people?
I can make an educated...
Elevator pitch for Hegel. I know almost zero things about Hegel. Hegel? I don't even know how to spell his name, honestly. Hegel. The G? E-L? Hegel? Yes. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. German philosopher. Elevator pitch is this. One of the most important figures in German idealism, okay? The fundamental figure of, one of the fundamental figures of Western philosophy. We've got contemporary philosophical issues such as aesthetics, ontology, politics, analytic, and continental. He's an important philosopher. I think that's the elevator pitch. There you go. I am very well, and we're going to test that wellness with some unwholesome debates.
Informed guess based.
But you
on
didn't
the
say
fact
I
that-
don't think. You said there's no way,
I can
and he
say
didn't.
that based on the type of people I know who are familiar with Hegel, these people who have really mastered
Who?
Hegel tend not to act like man children. on
Wait.
TV.
So you're assuming
So that's just a
without hold on.
correlation
So
I
you're
can draw.
assuming based on the character and temperament of people who you know have read Hegel and
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
you trust in. What does that have to do with how someone is going to act specifically? Do you think Hegel is some kind of cultural prescriptive thought guru like Jordan Peterson? He tells you how to talk and tells you how to act and things like that.
So this is a very interesting point that our friend here is making. This guy, first of all, this guy on the screen that we can see, his name is Infrared, and he's making this point here that you can know things and still act like a crazy person, apparently. And our friend over on the phone, his name is Rim. He's a philosopher also. He thinks that apparently you can't be educated and act like a child or like a well, you've already noticed how this person is acting. You can't act like this person and be educated, apparently, from Rim's perspective. But that's not a very good point, is it? It's not a very good. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't really follow. So we're investigating that a bit more, I suppose.
Because I know you're used to only being on Twitch and like only being in public and like bluffing and pretending you're a guy who knows what he's talking about. So you only know these cult of personality people like Jordan Peterson and all these people on YouTube and stuff, and you really associate something like philosophy with, you know, personalities and online influencers, like as if like Hegel was some kind of Jake Paul, because that's all you fucking understand or know. But I really want you to justify, I really want to pin you down and justify how you could say that your perception that I act like a man-child and I'm not sophisticated and I don't speak seriously like perspective philosophy can justify the assumption that I could not have possibly mastered Hegel's system at 19 years old. Please justify that, Rem.
Yeah, I mean, in order to do that, you'd have to be probably like a child prodigy. And if you have actually mastered Hegel, I mean, presumably you wouldn't be spending your time acting like, you know, a child on Twitch.
Wait, why? Wait, hold on.
A ton of money publishing books on him. What are you
What?
spending your time
Wait.
here for?
So,
Go actually.
Rem, have I written books before?
And I love watching the chat along with this. These guys are pretty crazy, along with our friend Infrared here being crazy. But man, he's got some points here.
How many have I written? And if I have,
I said I don't think you have.
you don't think I've written books?
You've written books?
Yes, I have. I just didn't release them publicly. Yes, I have written books.
I would
Actually.
love to read one of your books.
Well, I don't want a sniveling pseudo-intellectual like you anywhere near my books. Yeah.
Okay.
But so Rem,
So you've written books, but you won't
Always
allow
share your
someone like
subs.
me
We
to
grow
read them.
stronger
I'm
every
not.
day.
absolutely not. No.
Now, has he written books or not? Is he posturing to pretend as if he's written books? Or has he written books? What a weird position to be in.
But anyway, let's continue. So Rem, so you think that
God.
you think
You're
that
not
the
real,
hold
right?
on. I want to pin you down on this since you're such a philosopher.
And this is one of the main points here, one of the main curiosities for this character here, Infrared. Well, whether or not he is a character, he's a very interesting type of person. He's a very strange type of person, but he also seems to be educated in some strange way too. And the question is this person real? Is this a real person with real positions, or is he some sort of character?
actually sit
here. Rem, let's be philosophers and let's focus on the meat and potatoes. About since you're in philosophy, I want to put your philosophy to text. Do you think that a certain type of disposition is necessarily?
How does this sound to you guys? Oh, by the way, it's extremely loud to me. I'm trying to lower the volume a little bit so we can all not destroy our ears as we're listening to this. That's more along with the posturing thing. He's doing this to posture. So, how does that sound to you guys?
Implied by the mastery of Hegel's thought. Do you think a certain career? Do you think a certain? Okay, so let me ask you a question, Rem.
Inference to the best explanation. I think that would be the technical term for it.
So you're inferring what? You're inferring that I could not have possibly mastered. Hold on. I could not have possibly.
I understand you very well.
I could not have possibly mastered Hegel's system as 19 because within the limited range of my knowledge of what kind of people Hegelians are, they are nothing like you. That's pretty much your claim, right?
Well, yeah. So that's part of it. Another is that I don't know why you'd be spending your time on Twitch acting like a baby. I mean, so if you actually are able to show me some of these books you've written.
So these are two very, very, very not good arguments, right? You can't have mastered Hegel because you act like a child, and also you can't have mastered Hegel because you wouldn't be wasting your time hanging out on Twitch if you mastered Hegel. These are really, really bad arguments. However, they've been laid out at the moment. These are our points of contention, and they're crazier people. You don't think this guy's a character? Okay, maybe he's not a character. The curiosity is just that he's very smart. So that's the curiosity. He seems to be very well educated on a lot of the topics that he talks about. It's very strange. But this is a strange character. Strange person.
Well, since it's such a
maybe not a character.
Since it's such a decisive part of your argument, and no, I'm not gonna show you my fucking books. I've only showed like fucking 15 people my books. Why would I show you?
What's the title? Can you tell me the title of it?
Of which ones?
Of any of your books.
Okay, I have one book which is called Islam in the Shadow of Globality. I have another book called
on Hegel?
Sorry?
That one's not on Hegel though.
No, it's not.
What is the name of one of your Hegel books?
I haven't written a book wholly and specifically dedicated to Hegel. I don't know why I should have to have done that.
But you've incorporated Hegel into some of your books.
Obviously.
Which, what kind,
Like, for example, I wrote a book about utopian socialism in which I put to work Hegel's decisive distinction between the state and civil society in relationship to the Frederick Jameson's Universal Army and Universal Conscription in relation to utopian socialism and in relation to the South African EFF. So the book is called The South African EFF. I have another book called Form and Vlyast, which attempts to take a dive at dealing with the metaphysics of statehood in the age of quantum mechanics from a Hegelian perspective and against the Newtonian mechanics that informed Hobbes's perspective, the origins of statehood. And Form and Vlyast is about actually the origin of the Bolshevik Party, and it's about the October Revolution. And those, by the way, are just the books I've given titles to and like that I actually am committing to publishing.
It sounds like a person who at least knows something about some of the subjects that he's talking about. At least knows something. Now, I don't know how much he knows because I don't know anything about Hobbes or Hegel or any of the other EFF, whatever the topics he just mentioned. I don't know anything about any of that stuff. But it seems at least like he has a passing understanding, at the very least, a passing understanding of all of these topics. And Rim, the person who is on the phone, also understands philosophy, has a clear understanding of philosophy. He's not flagging a lot of the terms that he's saying. He's not flagging any of the things as being problematic. So it seems to suggest that Infrared knows at least something about the topics, and he's claiming to have written books on the topics. It's fascinating to me.
I have to do more edits, and I've been working on them for years and years and years. But those are the ones I've just know for certain I'm going to publish as different books.
How long is the one? How long?
See, Rem. Here's an issue you
No,
are
no, I'm just
making.
wondering.
No,
So
I know
here's
you're
my
wondering
question.
now, Rem, but you weren't justified in making all the assumptions you did in the fucking first place.
Oh, yeah.
Why did you make all the assumptions you do? And the minute I call you out that you just should have shut your fucking mouth and not made assumptions, now you're being all inquisitive and you're asking me all these questions because, oh, I'm interested in knowing them. I don't
know
care,
why.
Rem. I don't exist to interest you. I don't.
And again, fascinating to me, right? Because of course he's asking these questions about books and has he written books or does he know anything about it? And it's like a test of his understanding, a test of his knowledge. And when that test is checked, right? Yes, I write books. I have some understanding, at least some understanding of these things. He's asking more questions to probe even further, but that's kind of glossing over the fact that the initial point was completely bunk. So, which is not a good look for our friend Rim,
Care
unfortunately.
about the extent of your interest. All I care about is whether or not you can justify making all the assumptions and claims you made about me. And you really can't justify them because you were fucking wrong about
I
them.
don't have to justify anything. The way that you talk
Yeah,
now,
you don't.
with me
Rem.
And further, again, I don't need to justify any of the bad claims I've made. The way that you're talking to me now is enough. That's not that's not a very sound argument, I'll say. Doesn't follow.
You are making subjective
justify
claims.
yourself.
You're making subjective claims about how my temperament hurts my fifis, and I don't like that you're a man child and you're acting ridiculous. But Rem, if you want to play the game of subjectivity, we have to quantify it then, right? At that point, I'm a bigger fucking streamer than you. More people like me than they like you. More people are interested in me than they like you. So why is your opinion relevant?
And
doesn't
then ridiculous posturing, as if the size of your stream, your Twitch stream, is a measure of how intelligent you are or how good you are in some other way. The contrast of this stuff is very bizarre to me personally, at least.
But clearly, you seem to care a lot about.
But the common site of contention, because the site of contention is truth. Because Rem, it's about truth. It's about what is true. You are making claims about me you cannot justify as true.
What is truth?
This is where it starts getting to parts where I find extremely interesting and probably needs to be more thought about in philosophical spaces and probably in the spaces that we like ourselves. What is truth?
What do you mean?
Can you define truth?
Define truth. Go ahead.
No, I'm asking you.
There's literally a million ways you could define truth.
Well, what is your theory of truth?
I am using truth colloquially right now. I'm not interested in having a philosophical discussion with you about truth right now. Do you not know what I mean by true?
Wow, are you not?
Do you not know what I mean by true?
Well, I don't know. There's many ways. Like you said, there's many ways.
I know. I understand. So when I say you are saying things that cannot be justified as true,
yeah. What do we mean by true then?
Okay, so what do we call this phenomena here? This is a very strange phenomena. Our friend Infrared is saying that something Rim said was not true, and he means it colloquially. He's not trying to evoke any sort of philosophical strict concepts of truth. You know, we're not talking about Tarkovsky's deflationary theory of truth here. I don't even know if that's the name of the guy who talks about the deflationary theory of truth. We're not talking about some high-level philosophical concept. We're talking about what normal people mean when they say this thing is true or not true. But the philosopher Rim here is retreating to some sort of, like, trying to clarify a definition of truth, which it seems kind of unnecessary for the scope of the conversation. For the thing that was being communicated from Infrared was that a person said something that was not true. And we can all understand what that means. If somebody says something about somebody calls somebody the wrong name, or they say that they did something that they didn't do, we all understand that things are true or not true in that sense. We don't need some sort of rigorous philosophical definition to refer to that. So it's just very fascinating to me to see that we have a philosopher here, Rim, who is going back to where he's trying to pin down a specific philosophical definition of truth, which is completely irrelevant to the conversation that we're actually having. And I don't know what we call this phenomena, and it is something that may happen quite often. But we do want to be aware of it, I think.
In this context, what we mean as true
What is true?
is whether or not the form of your reasoning can be shown.
It's like evoking quantum mechanics to determine whether an apple fell on your head. Exactly that. Exactly that. Because you're looking at a particular scope of things that's, relevant in one particular way, and then you're kind of bypassing that to go to some lower level that's just not important. So you don't need some sort of rigorous philosophical definition of truth to figure any of that stuff out. You don't need to go down to the quantum level and talk about how all atoms are actually empty space. How is it that anything's really touching? Nothing really touches. It's all just magnetic. Who cares? That's not relevant to what we're talking about. You just got hit in the head by an apple. That's all you need to know, right? So this sort of bypassing or subverting the scope of the actual conversation is, well, something to be noticing.
To be consistent with your conclusion.
Sorry, I paused
yeah, what do we mean by truth?
What do we mean by truth? Okay, what is truth?
In this context, what we mean as true is whether or not the form of your reasoning can be shown to be consistent with your conclusion. Whether your reasoning, whether your line of argumentation can actually justify the conclusion you draw. In this context, that's all it means.
That's soundness, not consistency, but I think I understand what you mean.
When it's not soundness, it's...
So again, there's another weird thing. He says something very specific. He gave a definition, and then Rim is saying well, that means something. There's a philosophical term that is a different term that means that same thing. Well, does that matter? Does it matter if you have a different term that means the same thing? We know what we're talking about. I just define the thing. But okay.
Consistency.
Well, no. I mean, I feel like we should care about the truth of stuff, right? So we need to be careful with how we're using our words.
So can you justify those claims as true? Why would you say something to the... Okay, so why would you say something that you can't justify as true? Why would you say it?
Oh, no, I mean, I feel very justified in saying it.
But the justification you have given me, Rem,
yes,
was your subjective feeling that I'm a man-child and that I'm yelling all day and that a person who has read Hegel would not be doing that. But you haven't justified why we should agree with that. And then you've said that, well, everyone I know who's a Hegelian doesn't act like you. But what if all of the people you knew who were Hegelians were white and I was the only Arab? Does that mean Arabs can't be Hegelians by the scale and range of your inference and the form of inference you're making? What if all of the people you knew were men and then you didn't know any female Hegelians? Would you be justified in inferring that Hegelians cannot be female? Since you know nothing, it's clear you know nothing about Hegelianism itself, or at least you don't know enough about Hegelianism.
Interesting. And I'm loving the chat again here. Hegelianism is when you don't shout. You're a man-child, though. You behave like one. So it's just kind of split here, but then people are reminding everybody that Rim is being destroyed. Put it in the truth table. Okay. Yeah, lots of yelling and fighting between different points here. But people are reminding each other how much they're winning in the debate, which is kind of an interesting sort of note. I guess if you're having a conversation, you want to remind people that you're winning all the time, or you want to have your audience reminding other people in the audience that they're winning. So people are just going to tell everybody that how ridiculous the claim is by sort of reducing it to its essence. Hegelianism is when you don't shout and people are being destroyed and so on. Maybe something we can learn from. Maybe.
To actually justify why you would claim that I haven't mastered Hegel's system at 19,
destroyed.
You are in no position to actually draw a conclusion about whether I did or not whatsoever. My behavior doesn't justify the conclusion you draw. Just because the Hegelians don't act like I do doesn't justify you making a definitive conclusion. Whether you're justifying it on the basis of likelihood or inference is completely irrelevant. You are not justified to talk out of your fucking ass. It's simple as that, Rem.
Well, I mean, we'll just have to disagree, I suppose, on what I'm justifying.
I accept your surrender.
I accept your surrender.
What did I surrender on? On what point did I specifically surrender on?
If you're not willing to debate the conception of truth and justification with me, I mean.
And again, here Rim is saying that he that Infrared is not willing to debate, but there was no debate at all involved so far about truth. They weren't talking. Truth was just randomly brought up at some point. They weren't debating truth, and even though Rim asked for Infrared's position on truth, he didn't ask to debate it. There was no contention between what he said, and there's no reason to fight that. So that's not a debate. That wasn't a debate point. That wasn't a part of the debate at all.
I suppose we'll just have to agree to disagree on this. And if
So
you
wait.
are willing-
Now you want to debate about truth and justification. Do you really want?
I
Do
already
you really want to debate about the nature of truth and justification, Rem? And let's actually see if this is a test of your honesty, or do you want to see if I have a philosophically rigorous view of what truth is in order to justify the? In order to test the extent of my knowledge. What are we really looking for here, Rem? Because I haven't actually said anything that warrants an actual philosophical debate about truth. It sounds like you're just trying to test the extent of my familiarity with the relationship between truth and philosophy, which is a completely different issue than the curricular, commonsensical accusation that I'm throwing against you, that you're just talking out of your fucking ass. There's no need to have a debate.
Because I have trouble understanding.
Yeah.
You.
So is it that you want to have a debate about truth, or are you trying to expose me as someone who can't philosophically?
What you're saying.
You can't hear me.
You need to turn down the gain or something on your microphone.
Rem.
Because that's better. This is better.
Okay. All right. Oh my goodness. Okay. The posturing with the loud microphone. We're removing that apparently, and then we're getting to this again. I just want to point out here, our friend Infrared here is very sharp. Obviously, he's very sharp. You can tell when the debate is being morphed into something that it wasn't initially, and how Rim is kind of moving to positions that were initially irrelevant, that were not at all related, and continue to not be related to the topic at hand. Which is a big problem, obviously, but probably very difficult to spot if you're actually in a real debate. But luckily, Infrared can spot it and point it out and says it out loud to the audience.
Right now,
and I'll follow.
Are you actually looking to debate?
This is good.
Rem, which one is it?
Yeah.
Are you looking to, and then we're going to do this, we're going to test your honesty. Are you doing this to debate about truth and justification, or are you trying to find some kind of gotcha and try to prove, and you would do so pathetically, right? You would pathetically fail at that Haas does not have any rigorous philosophical notion or view of what truth is. I think you're just trying to test me, Rem. I don't think anything has actually warranted a debate about truth. Nothing clearly has. So I can only draw the conclusion that you're just trying to test me.
And what do we do in this situation where sometimes you do want to like test somebody to figure out what they know, so you can actually figure out where you can start your debate or where you can start your discussions. But that's not a debate, right? It's just asking somebody what their positions are or what their knowledge base is. And how do you do that in a way that's not sort of, like gatekeepy or kind of dishonest sort of trying to attempt of dismissal? How do you even engage in that type of behavior to figure out where you start? Now, I don't think that Rim was trying to do that at all. It doesn't seem like Rim is being very open here to try to figure out where Infrared's base of understanding is to begin a discussion. It just seems like he's trying to test him and dismiss him. But how do you do that in a way that's not sort of dismissive attitude, that's not sort of just trying to test somebody and throw out their ideas? Like, how do you actually inquire about somebody's position so that you can have a starting point for a conversation? I'm not sure, but we're watching to see how not to do it at least.
Well, I think you've posed it as this binary option, which I don't think it is, because I'm still, from my perspective, I'm still not convinced that you're not kind of like an actor.
Okay.
And he thinks he's an actor. Okay. Also, I just want to point out chat again. Everybody in chat liked the loud. Everyone in chat liked the very loud gain on the microphone. Okay. Now I can't hear. Okay. Turn it back up. Turn up the gain. Okay. Not enough gain. My ears aren't bleeding. Turn it up again. Change it back. I missed the bass boost. Okay, interesting.
On
Okay,
the show.
okay, sure. What?
So this is partly
What?
way
Hold
for
on.
me
What
to figure
justifies
out-
me being an actor? Go ahead.
Joe,
I
just
actually
your
don't
connection.
like you, Rem. I literally don't like you, so I'm not
Oh
acting.
no.
Yeah.
I'm very aware of that.
Wait. How can you justify that awareness though? If I'm an actor, you can't pick and choose what I am and I'm not acting about.
And again, we're very, very, very quick here. I don't like you. Infrared says, I don't like you, Rim. And Rim says, I'm aware that you don't like me. And Infrared says, okay, how do you know that that's not an act? You think I'm acting about Hegel? You think I'm acting about my writing? You think I'm acting as being a man-child here? How do you know I'm not acting disliking you? How do you determine which parts of me are an act and which parts of me are not an act? I don't know. You're enjoying the stream. Well, thank you, Liam. I'm glad you're here to enjoy the stream. Ilias, you enjoyed my previous stream with Leo and Kurt. Great analysis in the conversation. Very intelligent and full of wisdom. Yes, that was very intelligent and full of wisdom. This, what we're watching today, probably not as full of wisdom. Maybe intelligent, not as intelligent, but a little intelligent. Definitely not as full as wisdom. But I'm glad you enjoyed the stream of Leo and Kurt. Yeah. When I'm preparing the streams, the prepared streams are a top tier. I really like that. So we'll be getting a little bit more from Leo and Kurt probably soonish. I'll have to check the video when that comes out and see if it's something that I can add more to and get a little bit extra precision. But I'm excited to see that conversation when it comes out. And there'll be some more things that are more prepared, much more wholesome, much more intelligent, much more wise in the future. Well, thanks for hanging out.
About, right?
No, you're right that like it's very difficult for me to know for sure.
Right. So what is
go
the
into your
decisive sight of me acting? If you can know that I genuinely dislike you, then what do you know is real and what do you know is not real? So we can draw
brain.
the.
No, I mean you're right. I can never know necessarily.
You can never know.
for
But
sure.
you just admitted that you knew I didn't like you, and I don't like you.
Well, you could like me. It's possible.
But but no one forced you to admit and say, "Oh, I know you don't like me." Was that a Freudian slip? Was that a slip of tongue? You walk that back and take it back.
Just a way of moving the conversation forward.
So how is it moving the conversation forward? You could just say, "Oh, I don't know if you like me or not."
It's also true that what Rim is saying right here, it could just be to move the conversation forward, right? If somebody says something, you just affirm it to keep going, right? You don't want to deny everything and deny everything. And also, you don't want to just be silent if somebody makes a claim. So if somebody says, I don't like you, then you can just say, yeah, I get you. I understand. I know that you don't like me. And you just kind of move the conversation forward. So it could have been that. Rim certainly could have just done that. But when you start to grill it, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. If you know that I don't like you, how do you know whether or not I'm acting? When am I acting? Very funny.
Well, okay.
I think you do know that I don't like you, Rem. I think you're being very selective about my acting, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know.
So you claim you don't know enough about whether I'm acting or not, and what is that decisive? Like, where's the decisive point in that?
Like I can't draw a line for you. Of course, that would be kind of unreasonable.
So what conclusion do you draw that I'm an actor? Therefore, what?
Therefore, it might not be worth engaging seriously with you.
Oh, really? Okay. So why are you talking to me in the call right now?
Oh, well, because it gives me viewers.
Right, of course. Yeah. Well, at least you're honest in that regard, Rem.
Well, what? I even said this before. You think I'm actually talking to you because I'm trying to
Rem. So your copium strategy is basically to say that, well,
listen, Infrared, are you going to talk to me about the nature of truth?
Since I'm scared, well, all you have to do is answer my fucking question. Are you interested in debating about truth, or are you interested in testing me, Rem? Answer that fucking question and stop being a pussy. Answer that fucking question, Rem. Are you interested in debating about truth, or are you interested in testing me?
So, okay. Well, the chat really liked that apparently. Soy rage, man-child, so angry, soy rage alert. This is content, so triggered, wrecked. Okay, people like that. Man, okay, so it's so funny because Rim got loud and, started yelling, which I think it will work in real life, probably, maybe in real life, but Infrared is high level here with his intelligence and his aggression here, because he has a microphone that has gain and he boosts his gain. You heard a second ago where he lowered his gain and talked and it sounded normal. So even if he were yelling, it would be pretty normal. But here, he boosted the gain a little bit more, so he sounds a lot more present. He sounds a lot more, more dominant in the conversation over the yelling here, which is unfortunate for Rim because he doesn't have the help of the technology. Good morning. What's up, Uncle Martha? How you doing? This is a high level philosophical debate, disciple. This is what we're watching.
Are you interested in debating me about truth? Because if you're interested in debating me about truth, you have to justify why. Why do you want to debate about truth? What have I said on the nature of truth that is a point of contention and debate and is worthy of debate? We will begin there.
Well, any claim that you make is going to be a claim that follows a certain understanding of truth.
And
So,
by the way, Rem,
for example, if I said
you're not right. You're not correct. You're fucking wrong here. Rem, you know what? Rem, you are fucking wrong about that. You're literally wrong about that.
And this is a position that I really strongly agree with Infrared on this point. Rim is saying that if you're making any position, you're always making a claim about truth. Like it's built up from truth. There's like this sort of progression. You start with some sort of truth in order to make all of your claims. But then Infrared is not. He's saying that that's not the case. You don't need this. He's going to explain a little bit more. Infrared has hit the golden spot of chat size, big enough for memes and hive mind, but not too big to be unable to read. Oh, I see. He seems like a nice young fellow. Well, that's certainly one interpretation here.
Rem, actually, there is a huge discontinuity between the method by which people consciously and explicitly justify their concept of truth philosophically and the functional and practical reality of the truth claims and claims they make. Like, there's a difference between what people actually consider true and not true, and the way in which people attempt to render explicit the concept of truth. There is a sorry, what?
Can you demonstrate that to me?
Oh, you're trying to troll me with the alacrity thing?
No, I'm genuinely curious. Can you actually demonstrate? Because I don't believe that.
Okay, you want me to demonstrate that there is a discontinuity between the concept of truth and the operative and real sense of truth people have.
So this is another difficult thing. And how do you show this? How do you demonstrate this in some way? And if you start trying to demonstrate it, you're probably going to be trapped in some sort of philosophical nonsense. So the claim is that normal people, talk about truth in a way that is very different from what philosophers talk about truth, and how philosophers have this sort of hierarchy of, any of their concepts. But in this case, truth being very important for all of your claims. So you make any claim, it's some sort of truth claim, and that truth claim is grounded in some philosophical conception of what truth is. This is like the philosophy thing. And people, normal people, don't do that. Normal people just have some sense of what is true and what is not true, and it doesn't relate to the philosophical conceptions of truth. They're just different things. But how do you show that? I don't know. How do you demonstrate that? I'm not entirely sure how you do that. And if you start to investigate any of the natural truth claims of a person, you can always shoehorn it back into some philosophical truth definition. So it's kind of a tricky thing to attempt to demonstrate. But Infrared, this is the point that he's trying to make. Normal people, when you talk about truth in a sort of colloquial sense, it's not referring to what philosophers talk about with truth. And we do want to be aware of this. If you have like a very precise philosophical definition of something, that does not invade the space of natural language definitions of things. And the same for spiritual stuff. When we talk about spiritual things and we have a very precise understanding of the spiritual world, that does not necessarily invade the space of what normal people are talking about when they talk about spiritual concepts. The same with, consciousness or anything you want to have. If you have a very precise sort of understanding of something, that does not necessarily invade the space of natural language definitions or natural usage of those words or those similar concepts.
I no. When I'm talking about what truth is,
Yeah.
it's a question that applies to everybody, whether anyone is aware of it or not. They're engaging with the notion of truth.
But they are not engaging with the concept of truth that is relevant to philosophy.
So Rem is saying whether you know it or not, you're engaging with the concept of truth, right? And then the concept of truth that he's referring to is whatever his philosophical definition is. That's just not the case. Well, at least from my opinion, that's just not the case. People are referring to different things. There's just something different. And you can try to shoehorn everybody into fitting some philosophical definition, but that's not what they're doing. That's just you shoehorning them into that position afterwards.
No, they're not.
You would have to
Actually, no, Rem. The burden of proof is upon you to prove something that hasn't been proven in the first place.
Well,
since the overwhelming majority of people, Rem, shut the fuck up for a second. Since the overwhelming majority of people, like 99% of people, will never be philosophers, and yet still have some kind of sense of what is true and what is false, and speak about the world in terms of true and false. What?
You're presupposing that everyone has this correct conception of what truth is.
No, I did. That's not what I said. I said they have a sense of what true or false is, i.e.
So again, and it's kind of interesting to hear Rem, philosopher here. He's a smart guy. He's a philosopher. He understands philosophical concepts. He seems to have baked into his understanding of how people use words and their definitions that one must be correct. One must be, there's like a fighting that must happen. There's a war over how people are using these terms. So he thinks that when infrared is referring to normal people having a sense of truth, that infrared is assuming that their truth, the sort of colloquial sense, is correct. No, not correct. Different. There's a natural sense what normal people, everyday people mean colloquially by truth, and there's the philosophical concepts, all the concepts of truth, and they don't need to be like fighting each other. One doesn't need to be better or more correct than the other. That's just not a necessary part of people having different ways of viewing the world.
This inkling of an intuition, and philosophy helps us,
Rem. I'm saying such a banal, self-evident, uncontroversial fucking thing. All I'm saying is that 99% of people, despite never knowing or caring about what philosophy is or the concept of truth explicitly whatsoever, will know how to say, for example, oh, what you said about me the other day isn't true, or oh, that's not true, the contrary. Sorry, people use this in their everyday fucking practical, functional language.
It wrong.
They might be using it wrong.
What? They might be using it wrong.
They might be using it wrong. So here, in Rem's perspective, people can have the wrong definition of truth. Philosophers figure out truth. They have the correct definition, or they're maybe getting closer to the correct definition. He hasn't explicitly said anything about that nature, about that process. But a colloquial person, just colloquially speaking about truth, may be using the word incorrectly. We heard a little bit about this, something similar, where we were listening to Kurt and Leo, where Leo is talking about the usage of the word energy and how words need to be used in a proper way, and so on and so forth. I really don't agree with that. Now, certainly, from one perspective, you use the word in a proper way. If you're trying to be within, the theories of truth in philosophy, well then yes, truth means something specific and you use it in that specific way. But if you go to a different theory of truth, then truth means something different now. And if you go to colloquial usages of the term, then it means something different. And if you go to religious usage of the term truth, it means something completely different too. So it's different per different contexts. And I think we want to be aware of that and not say that one is right and the others are wrong. Possibly.
What do you mean they're using it wrong?
They could be using truth in a way that's
if you are claiming they're using it, Rem, if you're claiming the way 99% of people use words is wrong, then you are overreaching the domain of philosophy in places where it doesn't fucking belong.
Overreaching the domain of philosophy, right? It's a good way of putting it. I like that, the phraseology there, right? People do this all the time. You overreach. You go beyond the scope of where your thing is relevant. You try to expand beyond wherever your the relevancy of what you were doing and to invade the spaces of other things. That's how I usually say it, invade the spaces of other stuff. Overreaching. Well, I don't know better ways to say it, but I'm trying to develop a sort of a more clear language for describing that. But I like this overreaching bounds of philosophy here.
Simple as that. You're
No, I'd like you to
overreaching.
demonstrate
You
that
are
you're
being
using
greedy
correct
about where the actual domain of philosophy is. Philosophy doesn't exist to correct people about their actual, real, practical reality. Philosophy deals.
Oh,
Yeah, philosophy is its own sphere. Philosophy doesn't go and say, "Oh, the way people use language in their everyday and common use is wrong, and we philosophers are correct." Which
I mean, you know
philosopher does that?
listen, I understand that you're a master Hegelian,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, not just in analytic, but also continental philosophy now in semiotics and even in deconstruction is actually analyzing the way that
What's
we
up?
use words and trying to determine whether we're using them
Okay,
correctly
so
or
I
not,
have a
whether they
question.
are
How do you
conclusive.
know? How do
Correctly or
you
not.
know someone? How do you know you are not superimposing claims or presuppositions upon someone that they have never claimed and that they are not in their thoughts or in their head presupposing? Like, for example,
This guy seems angry. This guy is angry. This guy is unhinged. That is the correct term. Unhinged. This guy is crazy. He's a little aggressive. He's a lot aggressive. However, he also seems to be the one that's correct in this perspective. And he's giving us some better ways of describing certain things a little bit.
if someone uses truth in a way that, while common and practical for them, violates what you think is the true concept of truth from a philosophical perspective, how do you know you're not just superimposing a position that they don't have? What if they don't care about the concept of truth? What if they're not even having in their mind the concept of truth? How do you prove that they are actually dealing with the concept of truth relevant to philosophy? Can you prove that?
So again, that's the other thing that he's saying. I like this phrase again. Okay, I'm quiet. I'll turn them down a bit. He's saying that some people in philosophy and other fields of study are superimposing their own definitions onto other people. And they're projecting what they think that these words mean over other people's usage of the words. Which, again, I just like this terminology. He's using superimpose rather than superimpose. I think is a good way of putting it, right? So you have a very strict philosophical definition of truth, right? I can learn and I can get a precise understanding or a clear understanding of what truth is in some philosophical sense, and then I can try to superimpose my definition over other people, and then notice that everybody else is doing truth wrong. That's a silly project to do. That's kind of ridiculous. You probably don't want to be doing this sort of developing your own definition very strictly, and it's good to develop your own definition. That's good. But you don't want to then try to superimpose it onto everybody else and assume that they are trying to do what you have defined as truth. Probably not. Probably not. I wonder how many of these Twitch philosophers are actually concerned with truth rather than simply winning the Twitch debate. Well, that's a good question. Probably, I don't know how to answer that. It's a little bit of both, right? It's definitely a little bit of both. And we can infer from a lot of the posturing that maybe winning the debate is more important. But it's very strange here. Honestly, I feel like the angry guy here in this situation, Infrared, seems to be more concerned with the truth than the other guy. He's directly insulting and being mean in a lot of ways, but he's not misunderstanding the arguments, and he's not mischaracterizing the arguments. So that's bizarre and interesting.
Well, for one thing, we're always engaging with the topic of truth because the very idea of having knowledge itself requires, having truth in some
Yeah,
sense.
can you
Whether
answer
that's
my
gonna be
question now?
cashed out.
Yeah. Can you answer
I
the
am. I
question?
am.
How's the
That's
volume here?
Now
what
that
I'm
you
doing.
just avoided the question by saying that it's not under
Actually,
contention
there's
that
this thing where you just get a little
Rem, it is
background
not
so that
under
you can
contention.
understand what I
It's
was
not
gonna
under
say.
contention that truth is necessary for knowledge. The question is, in an everyday, ordinary, and common context, can you justify, can you prove to us that everyone has the concept of truth? That the concept of truth relevant to philosophy is what is conditioning and premising people's sense of truth in the ordinary context. Can you prove that, Rem? Please prove that specifically.
Sure. I mean, actually, that's kind of baked into an investigation of truth in the first place, because philosophers often, when they're investigating the nature of truth, are going to take a bunch of uh, instances where there tends to be some type of agreement. It doesn't have to be based on anyone else's. It could be an individual based intuitions on, true statements. And then over time, through a process like reflective equilibrium, you're going to essentially narrow down the conditions required for a statement to be true or not, depending upon, for example, whether you're willing to give up that certain statement that you tend to make, like when you're saying that this is true. Like, for example, if I take a theory of truth that means correspondence with something out there in the world, right? That rules out a lot of things that we typically want to say are true, like that Sherlock Holmes, smokes a pipe, right? That's not something that I can point to in the external world. So that's an instance where, I might have to weigh whether I really value those types of truth claims over other ones that are more ordinary truth claims, such as, there's a cup on my table, for example. So
It's interesting that you read Rim as sounding calm in this situation. I don't think he sounds calm, but he's definitely not as aggressive. But peaceful wouldn't. I don't think peaceful fits. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just reading it incorrectly. He doesn't sound calm to me. He doesn't sound really peaceful to me. But okay, yeah. Certainly, being right and angry is not a good position to be in. But what we can learn from the person who is right is we can learn the rightness part. We can try to learn the right. We can try to sift through the unwholesome angriness and find the right bits, and see how we can utilize that rightness and see the world in that correct way, and maybe develop some tips or develop some techniques from the style of presentation here, without being corrupted by the anger. Difficult task, but maybe one that we can try our best to uh, attempt.
we
Okay,
start from, of course.
okay,
and
you
let me
have
finish.
proven.
I'm
Okay,
answering your question.
no, you're
I'm
not. You're
answering your
not,
que-
because
I
what you have.
actually am.
Okay, go ahead, Rem. Finish.
Yeah, thank you. So we start from these presuppositions, which is absolutely true. We start from these presuppositions of what is actually true in the world, and then we refine this conception to make it more coherent and more. I don't. I wouldn't say correct, because correctness is a whole different issue. Because
Please
do we
speed it
need
up,
that
Rem.
objective?
Okay. Well, as far as ultimate truth, personally think it's something really seen and stabilized by those who have established deep peace. I think I agree with that, but the main point of contention that is being talked about right now is the different usages of the word truth, right? So if we talk about ultimate truth, are we talking about something that is invading the space of all other truth claims? Or are we talking about something specific within the realm of, I don't know, psychological truth? Or are we just talking about being peaceful at all? Or are we talking about some sort of religious truth? Or are we talking about some sort of spiritual truth? Or are we talking about a colloquial usage of truth? Or are we talking about a philosophical usage of truth? And do they need to invade each other? And it seems Rim currently is trying to justify that the philosophical definitions of truth are what normal people mean when they talk about truth. So Rim, the guy on the phone, is trying to suggest that everybody who colloquially speaks of truth is using the philosophical usage of the word truth. However, they're usually wrong or misguided or something like that, which seems to be like a weird sort of thing to be simultaneously true.
Please speed it up.
Well, I thought you wanted to have a serious conversation on.
Well, we're not,
the topic.
because you're avoiding my question, and I can demonstrate why you've just completely avoided my
Okay, go
question in
ahead.
its entirety. There is not one fucking facet of your response that addressed my question. You have only pointed out that philosophers attempt to take as their object the ordinary use of truth and begin from there.
No, they
As
don't
this,
take it as their object.
as
It's
the
a
starting point,
presupposition.
which you know what I mean, as their starting point of their contemplation and reflection of the
Yes,
concept,
and it's a refinement.
and they turn something that is suspended in ordinary use in reality into a concept, right? But when they
It's something that's already there.
but
They aren't
that's what you have to prove, Rem. You have to prove that it's already there, and you haven't proved it. All you've proven is that philosophers have taken something and they try to be consistent with how it's used already there, but you have not proven that it is already there. That's what I am asking you to prove. So can you prove that?
Well, how do you prove that? A very difficult thing again, right? So surely a philosopher will take the concept, like the normal usage of most words, and then try to refine them and develop a more clear definition or usage of that term, a more fleshed out usage of that terminology. Sure, but the question is that more fleshed out version what was initially the colloquial usage of the word? Are they the same thing? Is the colloquial usage attempting to be the sort of refined, fleshed out, philosophical, rigorous version of the word or not? I would say no. Rim says yes. How much left in the vid? Well, we're not going to watch the whole thing. Just, I'm not sure how much we're going to watch. Just a little bit.
What you're asking me to prove is something that is possible to prove, nor does it.
Of course it's not fucking possible to
Because
prove,
it's built
because there's
into
no
the
reason to believe it's the case. There is no reason to believe it is the case. If you believe it is the case, you are committing an unwarranted dogmatism, Rem. There is no reason to believe it is the case.
And I agree with
built
that
into the
a
idea
lot.
of conceptual analysis that you are working with ideas that somebody already has.
Louder.
And
No,
then
you are
filtering
work.
out
Here's the
Louder
thing.
means right.
Yes. Do you know what the idea is? Do you think the idea is the same thing as
Yeah,
the
what do you mean by
fleeting
idea?
and the idea relevant to philosophy?
What do you mean by idea, right? We're speaking normally, right? We could speak normally. You know what I mean by idea.
Which begins from Plato onwards. That idea.
I
That is the idea relevant to philosophers. The ambiguous and fleeting and indeterminate and completely wishy-washy things that are suspended in everyday language have never been the idea for philosophers. That has never been the site of ideas for philosophers. Philosophers have dealt with the idea on the terms of philosophy, and they kept it there. They didn't go up to random people on the street and say, you are misusing the idea, or you are using a false notion of truth. Because truth, as is relevant to them, philosophy's role is not to dogmatically insist that everyone is already a philosopher. Philosophy's role is to insist that it can clarify. It can give clarification to what is.
don't actually. In fact, you seem to be kind of proving my point, because quite literally, the idea of conceptual analysis is showing that, hey guys, we use this concept. Let's narrow down.
No,
and make more
here's
clear
no.
what this
It's
concept
not.
is.
It's not that
not
we.
an invention.
No,
You wanna
no,
pose it
it's
as an
not that.
invention.
It's
it is
there.
a refinement.
Listen,
and an
listen.
explication upon
Listen,
the
Rem.
concept.
So here, I mean, there is a refinement that happens in philosophy, and I quite like the process personally of refining lots of things. Mostly art for me, refining my appreciation for art, getting more clarification, getting a lot more precision and appreciation. Same thing happening with philosophy, same thing happening with spirituality. I like to narrow down the concepts a lot, but that doesn't mean that I am changing or overriding the natural usage of other people or any other usage of any of the concepts or words or terminology or labels. I don't think. But Rim seems to think so. So again, fighting on this point.
that
But
ordinary people
Rem,
already have.
listen. Rem, shut the fuck up and listen, little boy. I'm educating you now. Rem,
Oh, yeah.
when you turn it into a concept, though, that's the thing.
What do you mean turn it into a concept? What does that mean?
It means you cannot treat it as though it is the
No,
concept relevant
what
to
does it
philosophy
mean to
already.
turn something into a concept. What does that mean?
You want to talk over me again, little boy? Or you want to
Do you
fucking
wanna
hear my
answer the
response?
question? You keep saying I'm doing something. Explain what the hell it means.
Explain what the hell it means. You know you sound like Jordan Peterson, right? But anyway,
Oh,
Rem.
both Canadian. So I
Yeah,
can understand.
anyway, Rem. Let me explain it to you
What does it
again.
mean to
Okay, so I don't remember. I don't know if I'd watched this far. I don't know if he dodged the question because he didn't answer the question. What he might answer here.
turn something into
What
a
does it
concept?
mean? What is it? You want me to fucking respond or you want to keep talking over me?
Oh, are you gonna answer it?
Yes.
Okay.
It means that something suspended in reality is now put within the frame of conscious, explicit, and conceptual thought.
Okay, that's a very good answer, right? What does it mean to turn something into a concept? What he's trying to suggest is that there are things that people are using colloquially or in any other field of study, and to turn into a concept, as he's referring to it, is to take whatever other things from other fields of study and bring it over to philosophy and use that as a starting point for a new philosophical term, right? That's to turn into a concept. So, yeah, okay, he answered pretty clearly. And he was a little thoughtful. Like he stopped for a second. He thought about it. He slowed down and said the thing. He was angry before. He was angry during, and I suspect he's going to be angry afterwards. But again, he's a very sharp kind of guy here. He seems to be. He knows what he's talking about, at least. Or he has a very clear way of expressing what he thinks, which is fascinating. Again, fascinating to me.
We're turning thoughts that are not necessarily conceptual thoughts relevant to philosophy into objects of inquiry and relevance and investigation for philosophers. So to turn something into a concept, so to speak, is to make something relevant to the domain and sphere of philosophy. That's all it means.
Which seems pretty clear when he
The
said
way
it initially.
philosophers
I
treat
don't think I
things
quite
is
understand.
because the way philosophers are going to treat something is going to be different from how ordinary people treat it.
Well, what do you say then to like ordinary language philosophers who don't actually do anything that you're describing, but still try to explicate the concept by actually treating it how it is?
Because
used on an
ordinary
everyday
language
basis?
philosophy is a farce. That's why. That's what I will say to them.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
it's a
any
contradiction in
philosophy that
terms.
is-
It's a contradiction in terms. That's my position on ordinary language philosophy.
okay. So going back,
Ordinary language philosophy being a contradiction in terms, of course, if we're trying to follow along with what he's saying here, ordinary language is one domain of study, one field of understanding the world. Philosophy is a different field of study and understanding of the world. If you're doing ordinary language philosophy, that either means that you're just looking at people's ordinary language and turning those into philosophical concepts, or it's a contradiction because you can't do philosophy in ordinary language. Ordinary language is a thing, philosophy is a different thing, they're separate.
back to your idea. So what is this fleeting domain that you're talking about? Are you talking about like the direct?
It may
like,
be the sphere.
phenomenological experiences.
It can be the sphere of. It can be the sphere of phenomenology for Husserl and later Heidegger, or it could be the object relevant for psychoanalysis.
Do
For
you think
example,
that Husserl was a good philosopher?
I don't think Husserl was a philosopher at all,
Why?
because again, for me, philosophy ends with Hegel.
That seems like a very arbitrary line to draw. Doesn't
So again, and then we get to this sort of weird position. It's not that weird because I've heard him talk about this before. Or maybe I watched this here. I don't remember where I've heard this. Anyway, he's got this very. Well, I don't know how strange it is because I don't know a lot of definitions of philosophy. But there's a particular tradition that Infrared is referring to as philosophy, and he has a particular position on that particular tradition. And the tradition starts with Plato, or Socrates, I guess, Plato, whatever, and ends with Hegel. Did you just say Hegel? Ends with Hegel. That's the tradition of philosophy. Anything outside of that is not philosophy anymore. And that's his position. He has a strong position there, but he doesn't seem to think that everybody else needs to have that same position, but that's his position. He can have an interesting position in a way of defining the tradition of philosophy. I think that's pretty cool, personally. I like that a lot. Interesting.
Well, it's not arbitrary.
What about
It's not a very uncommon position either to hold that Hegel was the last philosopher. Like,
Yeah,
for example,
not if you're an online LARPer. I agree, but
what do you mean not if you're non literally it's you think I'm the first person to say Hegel was the last philosopher?
There are many people in Discord philosophy servers who say similar things.
So was Foucault?
And it's also interesting that he says, well, Rim just said that it was an arbitrary thing without inquiring about why that was said. Which is just a random point. I'm thinking about it now. Rim said that's a very arbitrary endpoint, and he didn't even ask what the criteria was for defining the tradition of philosophy to end at Hegel.
Was Foucault a Discord philosopher? Foucault.
I don't know. I don't know Foucault.
Well, Discord wasn't
never met him.
invented in this time span in which he lived. So are you sure?
No, I think Foucault's still alive.
Foucault is still alive?
Yeah. Him and Chomsky had a debate like last year or something.
I did not know that. No, he's not fucking alive. He died in 84. What are you fucking talking about?
So again, here, very strange. Rim, supposedly the calm one here, not engaging in a very honest way, and he thinks that it's funny, right? So Rim says that Foucault is alive. Infrared doesn't disbelieve him. He doesn't know. So he's like, okay, I'll look it up. And he finds out, oh no, he's dead. He's not alive now. So that interaction to me is like suggesting that Infrared is being very honest here, because he's not just saying no, he's dead or whatever. He's not trying to pretend that he knew he was alive. He's like, oh really? Oh, that's interesting. Let me look it up. And Rim over there is just lying for no reason. I mean, I guess it's funny for something, maybe. But that's just kind of bizarre to me. Why just lie about something that somebody doesn't know? Of course, if you're just lying about something to see if somebody like pretends to understand or pretends to follow along, well, that reveals a lot too. That's pretty interesting. But this just seems to reveal that Infrared is being very honest, and our caller Rim is not as much in some ways, at least.
So what was the point in saying that?
You actually bought him for a second.
I'm not keeping tabs on. I mean, like people like Hélène Bédieu are still alive, for example, or as far as I remember.
I am doing very well.
I'm not
Happy
keeping tabs on the.
I'm well, but we're watching some unwholesome content. So cover your ears if you're not into unwholesomeness. A couple of our chatters are not. So we've lost some people already today. But, well, learning about philosophy and not in a very mindful way, we'll say.
Lives of French philosophers. There's plenty of people that I thought were dead ended up still being alive before. So why is that a relevant point?
It's not. I was just
okay. It was Foucault a Discord philosopher?
I don't know Foucault.
Foucault said that for any thinker, for any philosopher, Hegel will be the last. All roads lead to Hegel. That's what he said. It's the position of virtually every Marxist that Hegel was the last philosopher.
But
yeah,
there are also people who say Plato was the last philosopher, and that everything are just footnotes on Plato, including Hegel.
Okay, but the whole point is that after Hegel, you are outside of philosophy. Mm-hmm. That's the main point. After Hegel,
you are using different definitions of philosophy.
Sure. After Hegel, you are no longer within the sphere of philosophy proper.
So every single philosopher on Earth, except for strictly specific Hegelians, are not philosophers.
No, Hegelians are not philosophers either. They are disciples of the last philosopher, Hegel.
Oh, I see. So there aren't any philosophers at all.
Wait, Rem, did you study elementary logic or whatever? Like, if I say Hegel is the last philosopher, that doesn't mean Hegelians are philosophers. What is wrong with your head, dude?
Well, if you completely take on all of his ideas, that presumably maybe you could.
It still doesn't make you Hegel. It still does not make you Hegel. Taking on all of
Hegel's... That doesn't make you Hegel, but I mean, just being a person, it's the ideas that you have. It's not...
No, it doesn't. It would make you the disciple of the last philosopher. It would not make you a philosopher.
Hegel... So again, another interesting point. Again, how he's defining philosophy. Strange, but we can understand his definition very easily. we can very easily follow and understand his definition, but for some reason, our friend Rem is not on board with any other usages of words, right? Because he thinks that people are using words incorrectly if they aren't using strict definitions that he may prefer in some sense. Maybe I'm being a little uncharitable by framing it in that way, but that's how he's putting it. So, okay, this is very clear. Hegel is the last philosopher. Anybody who is doing philosophy after Hegel is not doing philosophy. They're not a part of the philosophical tradition. And anybody who is following Hegel and trying to develop on Hegel, they're just disciples of Hegel, but they aren't philosophers. They're just learning from the last philosopher. Seems pretty clear again. The lack of filter and low inhibition makes him appear more authentic than Rem. Interesting. We also have the camera on infrared. We also have a little bit of the volume kind of thing. It doesn't seem to favor Rem. He's a lot quieter. Infrared has a lot more of he's got a little bit more dynamics in changing his gain on his microphone. So he can be angrier and louder, but then also turn it back down to give us that contrast to make it seem like he's being a little bit more chill. So I agree about the lack of filter, but there are also other factors going into it too, which are quite interesting in how it plays on how we read the situation, I think. But yeah.
Was the one who
Yes,
arrived at those insights in the first place. Everyone else is just studying them, so that makes him the philosopher. Do you know what a philosopher does? A philosopher is the one who... A philosopher doesn't just study philosophers. A philosopher actually engages in philosophy.
And that's what a great quote there. A philosopher does not study philosophers. A philosopher doesn't study philosophers. A philosopher engages in philosophy. So if you're studying Hegel, that's a good study. You can study your philosophers. He's a great philosopher. You can be a disciple of him. But that's not doing philosophy. That's studying a philosopher. And I think we can appreciate that too with any of our contemplative or maybe any of our consciousness work or any of our spiritual development, however you want to phrase that type of thing. The task is not to study other people who have done that work. The task is for you to do the work yourself. Right? You don't need to study the Buddha or study Jesus or study Ramana Maharshi or insert your favorite spiritual person. You don't need to study them. That's not being a spiritual person, is not studying other spiritual people. What you need to do is do the work, right? So you're not going to be a philosopher by studying philosophers. You need to be a philosopher by being a philosopher. So if we drop the title of philosopher, what does it actually change about what's happening now in the world? Nothing. So infrared doesn't really have a problem with a little bit more looseness in the terminology, it doesn't seem like. He just has a particular definition of philosophy being a tradition starting from Plato, ending with Hegel. And that's just how he's using the term, and he has a pretty clear usage of the term. And the other person doesn't like that, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
By studying Hegel, you are not engaging in any new philosophy. You're not even engaging in philosophy proper. You're just studying a past philosopher.
Do you think that, so you think that every single philosopher on the planet right now is not a philosopher?
You just worded that as though it's an absurdity. If we presuppose that they are philosophers,
Thank you,
obviously
fresh
it's an
mind.
absurdity to say that they are not philosophers.
Sorry, let me restate it then. You think everyone who claims to be a philosopher and
Full of
is
shit.
paid
Absolutely
to be
full
a
of shit.
philosopher?
Full of shit, yes. I do think they're not philosophers.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I have a similar position about mathematics in that anyone after
Why do I
Pythagoras,
care?
not a mathematician.
Can you demonstrate why I should care?
Okay, now Infrared's Infrared's been being mean the whole way through, but he's also he's not understanding a little bit of normal social cues, right? So Rim is saying, okay, I have a similar position in mathematics. He said Pythagoras. Anybody after Pythagoras is not a mathematician. They're just adding on to Pythagoras, I guess, which is a also interesting perspective, right? But then he's just saying that to sort of, it's a social thing to say. Oh, you have this position in philosophy. I have a similar position in mathematics. Let's be brothers in this type of position. It's a kind of a nice thing to do to build a little bit of rapport and build a social sort of, camaraderie. But completely shut down. Why is that relevant for this conversation? Well, it isn't relevant for the conversation. It's relevant for our social standing here, but not relevant to the conversation.
Let's stick to the main potatoes.
I can't really demonstrate that
I don't think he's mocking.
because I think that philosophy.
Maybe he's mocking him. Maybe he's also mocking him. Okay, I don't know. Maybe he's mocking him. That's also a possibility. Possibly he's actually just mocking him, saying that you thought he was mocking too. Oh boy. All right, maybe he's mocking him. Dang, well, Rim's being a little mean too. Maybe he's mocking him. Okay, that's unfortunate. Why is this guy so rowdy? Why is he so dismissive and angry looking? I don't think he's very dismissive. He's angry looking because he's angry. I don't know why he's angry, but he's angry a lot. He's angry a lot. I'm not sure why he's angry a lot, but he's angry a lot. You have indeed met some people who are splendid philosophers with their rich memory of many theories, and the shrewd flexibility of their countless arguments, and the constant power of their extraordinary perceptiveness. Yet within they are poor in matters of the soul, and they're destitute of true knowledge. That is from Damascus. Damascus. Is that a religious figure? Damascus. A lot of philosophers out there with sparkling wit, but poor in the inside. Interesting.
Philosophy ended with probably Herodotus, and
Okay.
Herodotus.
Okay.
didn't
Okay.
have
No.
the
No. Rem.
conception of-
You're trying to troll because you just got your fucking ass handed to. I exposed you as a fucking fraud. But let me entertain you, Rem. If you really want to maintain your little point with you.
So again, very interesting in debate. This is a kind of an important tactic for modern debates. You want to remind people that you're winning. So if you win something, you want to just keep hammering it down and tell people that you're winning. This guy's horrible. Not going to disagree with that at all. Neoplatonic philosopher. Oh, Damascus is a Platonic philosopher. Okay. Okay, very cool. Yeah, this guy's horrible. The other guy's kind of horrible too, but they're both. This guy's much more horrible, I think. However, interesting tactic. You got to remind people that you're winning if you're winning a debate. You know, tell them that you just handed them whatever.
Trolling?
Something
Why?
to notice.
Why is he the last philosopher?
Who? Oh, Herodotus.
Yes, Herodotus. Why is he the last philosopher? You're
He's
assuming
the
there's
last
no.
person to truly engage with philosophy proper
Yeah, why,
in the
though?
way that he lived.
Why?
So again, here it sounds like Rim was following the words and he's kind of understanding a little bit of what the language is. I think this is a joke again. I think this is a bit of a not a. I don't think this is a sincere. You guys are saying that he was mocking. It sounds like he's mocking now, definitely. But let's see where it's going.
Okay, will you not interrupt me while I actually try to seriously explain?
Go explain.
So, in the last days of Herodotus's life, he was incredibly sick, and he continually refused to take any advice from doctors or any medicine from doctors because he believed that as a philosopher, he essentially knew better than these trained, who were trained in like the Alexandrian sciences, the four humors and whatnot. And committing to his philosophical cause and these fundamental beliefs, he put himself in a bathtub full of horse shit and basically boiled to death in hot horse shit. And I think that you can't really top that.
Okay, so
it was
actually,
a mock.
Rem,
He's mocking.
and even look, Rem. So at this point, you've conceded to me, even you've surrendered. You're just trying
That's
to
not
troll.
a joke. That's
okay. Okay, so let's pretend you're being real, right?
No, that's real.
He's talking about Heraclitus. Herodotus is a historian. Okay, so I just want to. I'm following along with the troll. I know it's a troll. Herodotus is a. Okay, following along here. Some people are saying that he's talking about the wrong person. Herodotus. First writer of a systematic investigation of historical events. So this is a historian. The person who created history, apparently. So he was saying the wrong name. He was referring to the wrong person. The other guy is Heraclitus. This is the guy who boiled himself in horse poop. Ancient Greek pre-Socratic, Ionian philosopher. Oh. Birth. There's nothing about his death. Oh, there it is. Illness and death. Okay. His life as a philosopher was interrupted by dropsy, fluid retention, okay, which the physicians he consulted were unable to prescribe a cure, okay. There are several stories about his death. In one, he cured his dropsy and dies of another disease, okay. In an account, he buried himself in a cowshed, expecting that the noxious, damp humor, I don't know what the humors are, the humor will be drawn out of him by this warm manure. Interesting. Another says he was treated by a lament of cow manure, and after a day prone in the sun, he died and was interred into the marketplace. Interesting. Couple stories of his death. He died in poop. That's fascinating. Indeed fascinating.
Yeah, no.
Sounds like a Connor Murphy cure.
Let's pretend you're being real about the position.
You don't believe that's true?
No, but that you're qualifying, that you sincerely believe this makes him the last philosopher. Stay on, learn Logic 101, please. I'm not disputing whatever story you just told being true. I'm calling into question whether you sincerely believe this qualifies him as the last philosopher. So, Rem, this actually would not make Herodotus the last philosopher. It may just make him the most ethical philosopher in your view.
No,
in history of philosophy,
the last,
or the most
has done that.
What?
He had a complete system that allowed
Infrared
him
on the
to live
rise.
in a way that he just completely surrendered to his life.
But that does,
to death.
but guess what? Philosophy is, while ethics is a part of philosophy, it's not the same thing. So you have to actually demonstrate.
No.
So I mean, this is so unfortunate, right? Because Infrared has an actual position, a real position here, a real position of his delineation of what is philosophy, what isn't philosophy, and he's even being nice enough to consider the ridiculous scenario that Rim just laid out and saying that, yeah, he's actually maybe the most ethical philosopher, right? And he's understanding the normal perspective and he's interpreting, people's actions through his lens of philosophy. But he's not trying to suggest that he has the only way of viewing the world or the best way of viewing philosophy. He didn't bring it up in a way that seems to suggest that other people need to define philosophy in the way that Infrared defines a philosophy. It just seems like he's being super charitable and super nice here, whereas Rim is not in any sense, unfortunately. So it's pretty crazy to me.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
The fact that Herodotus didn't think that is quite literally why he is the last philosopher, because people who think otherwise are now no longer engaging in philosophy.
And okay. Then let me ask you a question. How does this qualify him as the last philosopher as regards to the fundamental question and essence of what philosophy is?
Super nice. Did I say nice?
Because he fundamentally believed that ethics was the complete end of all philosophy, and that to live in a way that is completely consistent with your ethical worldview. And
did I say nice? I clearly misspoke if I said nice. Neither of these people are being very nice. Definitely Infrared not being nice, but Infrared is being super nice. Oh man, yeah, misspoke. I want to amend that statement and just going to edit that one. And mulligans on that one. Definitely not super nice and absolutely not nice. But he's engaging with the topic sincerely, which is strange again, based on he's acting. The way that he's, this weird contrast of him being very sincere with the arguments and trying to follow the lines of argumentation and logic that our friend Rim is putting out. Infrared is actually following them sincerely, even when Rim is making jokes and being completely insincere. And then Rim is sticking with the joke. He said the thing and it was really funny. I mean, it was kind of funny, right? It was a funny joke, I think. But he's hammering down on it. After Infrared actually engaged with it sincerely, Rim is going to continue, right now it sounds like he's continuing to try to justify how Heraclitus, he's saying the wrong name, Heraclitus is the last philosopher, when he doesn't believe that. So why would he do that? Why is he keep continuing to engage with this silly joke? And Infrared is being very sincere and actually engaging with it seriously. So it's
Not
bizarre.
trying to extend philosophy to anything else. That is what philosophy truly is.
But you didn't answer my question.
What was the question? I tried
How
to
does
answer
this
why
resolve?
philosophy.
How does this resolve the fundamental project of philosophy?
Well, the fundamental project of philosophy
Which is
to
not just
determine
about
the
ethics.
bounds
You
of
can say
philosophy.
that you think that, for example, philosophy, the project of philosophy ends with ethics, right?
No,
But
it ends with a tub of horseshit.
okay, but you haven't gotten from A to B. You understand? You haven't
Well, yeah,
gotten from
but
A
you
to B.
haven't either.
In regards to what?
Like your notion of what philosophy is not somehow more justified than mine
Okay, so
is.
what's my notion of philosophy?
Oh, and again, this is very interesting. Like, remember, he started off by saying he asked Infrared a question. Infrared gave his position, and then Rim immediately said that what you're doing is arbitrary. Your position is completely arbitrary. But he didn't inquire about his position. He didn't ask what the requirements were for defining the tradition of philosophy to be as it is. He just said it was arbitrary. And now he's continuing to say, well, your position is not justified in any way, and it's just random. He didn't say it's random, but he's saying that it has no basis in any sense. I don't know if he said that word exactly either. So maybe I'm going to go back a couple seconds to hear what he said exactly. But he's saying that your position is not founded, and it's just arbitrary. But he doesn't even know what Infrared's position is. He doesn't know why Infrared thinks this. So how can he say this? Why is he saying
Okay,
this?
but you haven't gotten from A to B. You understand? You haven't
Well, yeah,
gotten from
but
A
you
to B.
haven't either.
You haven't either.
In regards to what?
You haven't gone from A to
Like
B.
your notion of what philosophy is not somehow more justified than mine.
Okay, so
is.
what's
Your notion of philosophy is not more justified than mine. I don't even think he suggests, Infrared doesn't even seem to be suggesting that his is more justified. It just has some justification. But Rim doesn't even know what his justification is.
my notion of philosophy?
Well, it's presumably whatever Hegel did and no one else can do since.
That's actually not true.
So there is something that more people can. There can be another philosopher.
No, there cannot.
Okay, then how is what I just said false?
Because the reason I'm saying and other people say Hegel was the last philosopher is not just because they're saying Hegel has the best or only philosophy. It's that
No. I know. I
they
was
believe
referring to whatever concept it is
Hegel
that
has
makes him the
resolved
final
Hegel
philosopher.
has resolved the question, the fundamental problem of philosophy.
What is that problem?
The problem of philosophy is the relationship between thinking and being in the form of the idea, the Platonic idea.
No, I just disagree.
Why is that?
I just do. I mean, I guess you disagree
but
with
you're,
my notion.
but
of
hold on,
philosophy
Rem.
too.
I have never made an arbitrary line where I'm saying I just think it because I think it.
It's a very specific definition of philosophy, right? It's a very interesting position to have. And again, he's not trying to change other people's position of philosophy. It's just his position. And Rim doesn't like this and calls it arbitrary without even investigating what the position was. So, and this is very strange to me. I mean, this whole thing is very strange to me because it seems like Infrared is not attempting to evangelize about his own particular position. So he's not trying to disagree. We agree that it's specific. We're disagreeing whether it's interesting, though. Well, whether it's interesting or not doesn't really matter. It's just that's his position. Infrared's position is that, and it's very specific, and it means that particular thing. And well, there you go. That's his position. It doesn't. You don't need to change your position to match his. It's just his position, and it seems to be the position of a couple of other Hegelians, of people who are disciples of the last philosopher. But that's just a position, and it happens to be his.
Well, why is that the philosophical question? Why isn't Herodotus's the fundamental question?
Why effectively what you're saying is why does philosophy begin with Plato?
No, I'm asking why is
right
reconciling the ideas of thinking and being. Why is that
not the ideas of thinking and being, but thinking and being as such
itself, as yes, in itself,
and
not
through the idea as the privileged medium of
why is that the fundamental question?
Why is the idea fundamental to philosophy?
Why is that the fundamental philosophical question?
Because for all philosophers in history, actually, they are responding to the challenge set before by Plato and the Platonic idea, what this implications has. To be consistent to the Platonic idea as the privileged site of the relationship between thinking and being, that has consequences and ramifications. That is the very object of philosophy, and
Yeah,
resolving.
So very, I mean, this seems so clear to me. He seems to be suggesting that Plato is the first philosopher, and he is setting up the questions of philosophy, and everybody else is trying to answer those questions that Plato let out, and somebody did it. Hegel answered all the questions. So that is the narrow tradition of philosophy based on his definition. Seems to be a clear definition. It's a fine definition. It seems like a fine definition to me.
you're excluding people who you don't consider to be, because I know many philosophers who don't engage with that concept at all, who I'd consider philosophers. So you're just kind of begging the question
He's not
by
begging.
saying that.
He's not begging the question. He's defining it, right? He's defining it. All philosophers, bar none, are responding to Plato in the way that he expressed it. All philosophers based on his definition, right? He's using the definition in that way, like in the way that he's using philosopher. That's how it's defined. So yes, by his definition, if we're using his definition, of course. But not all people who claim to be philosophers are doing that. Probably. Is his definition accurate? I don't know if accuracy is the proper thing. Like you can't. A definition is a definition. It doesn't need to be accurate. There's no accuracy is not a part of defining a word. You define the word. It doesn't need to be accurate. Accurate doesn't even come into the equation. It's how he's defining the tradition of philosophy. It's a definition. It's not accurate. You want to see an infrared tweet after this? I don't know what his Twitter is. Oh, you mean after? You mean you mean a tweet of this stream? Okay, I don't think we're. I don't think that's gonna be happening. Okay, I don't think Infrared and I have the same type of. I don't think I want Infrared's community to be coming over here. Have you been watching the chat? You watched his chat over there? I don't think that we don't want to be meshing our communities at all. I don't think. I like some of the ideas here. I don't like the approach very much. Definitely don't want the community to be even a little bit coming over here. Probably not.
Well, these other people who do this.
Okay, so what
are
to
doing
you is the
philosophy.
essence of philosophy?
I already said. I mean, it's
the Herodotus thing, right? Okay, but how is mine arbitrary though? Because because although there are other people who have a different view of philosophy, I would critique them not because I'm imposing some dogmatic form. I would critique them based on the content of what they're saying philosophy is. Not, I wouldn't just say.
What is wrong?
So again, so good, right? Right, so good. If somebody has a different definition, I'm not going to critique them to like fit my definition. They don't need to fit my definition. I would critique them based on their definition, if they have a different definition, and if it has, problems. So we can't just. The whole project is not to try to overthrow other people's definitions to match mine dogmatically. It's just something different. I define all tea drinkers as those drinking Wei Shan Oolong. I am a tea drinker this morning. Yeah. I very much like the definition of you're a tea drinker if you drink tea every day. If you don't drink tea every day, you don't drink tea. Which obviously I think it's a translation of meditation. You're a meditator if you meditate every day. If you don't meditate every day, you're not a meditator. Another one I like recently, if you're an artist, you must draw a line every single day to be an artist. If you don't at least draw a single line every single day, you are not an artist. These types of things where you're defining a very narrow sphere of what people are based on, a sort of arbitrary, it's not really arbitrary, but it's a very specific, narrow definition of usage of the words.
Wrong with Herodotus's?
What is Herodotus's?
Herodotus's is how long?
Right, of course, you could say oolong tea, right, is the start of Gong Fu. Gong Fu tea is oolong. Oolong is kung fu, and if you're not drinking oolong tea, you're not doing kung fu. It makes perfect sense, right? It's a very simple way of putting it.
Someone live of horseshit before they die.
And what does this have
Why?
to do with the essence of philosophy?
That is the essence of philosophy.
Why?
Because that's just what the nature of the question is.
I'm
what can I
okay. Well,
say?
the problem, Rem, is that I don't know of any philosophers,
I
and
gave you one, Herodotus.
okay, but I don't. As far as the history of philosophy is concerned, I could not possibly explain the development and history of philosophy on the terms of the development of that essence.
Does drawing a line in the air with concentration power so that everyone else in the room can see it count as drawing a line for an artist? I don't think drawing. I don't think drawing like I don't even know what you call air symbols or whatever. I don't think drawing in the air counts as artistic drawing. You must draw artistically. Artistically, you get a pencil, you get a pen, you get an ink blot, you get paint or something. You draw to hone your technique in your craft. You develop as an artist in some way. I don't know if drawing in the air develops you as an artist. Maybe in some weird esoteric artistry, potentially. But if you're not doing some sort of weird esoteric artist tradition, you must be honing your technique in order to be an artist every single day. At least a little bit, I think. Elitist is not elitist, it's just a definition. So again, it's just how you define the word. Some people have strict definitions and they want to have a particular tradition that they want to develop and protect, I guess. I'm not sure what the word is. You have a particular tradition, and that's it. That's your tradition. And you call it artist because that's the word that you use for your tradition. But it doesn't need to invade the space of other people using the word artist. People can use the word however they like. The whole tradition is responding to sauce, whether it's blue or not. Yes. You gotta be like Kandinsky, tasting blue sauce. It's very important.
Like, I could not explain, for example, Hegel could not write about the history of philosophy, which he did, on the transition from the post-Socratics to, I'm skipping a lot of it, the Stoics and the medieval scholastics and the Islamic philosophers and the Enlightenment, Descartes, Spinoza, Kant. Hegel actually imminently develops philosophy from one to the other as the development of one singular essence. He could not possibly do that on the terms and basis of the Herodotus shit, whatever you're talking about.
Can I propose to you a serious idea?
Let's get
like
serious
one of the
now.
fundamental questions of philosophy. And
Okay.
I'm just curious why you would consider it to be illegitimate. I would
Yeah.
consider, and this is a question that I would say a large number of modern philosophers now grapple with, is the question of how we can have reasons and what reasons are. That's what I would say the fundamental question of philosophy is.
Okay. Then
Because actually,
yeah, I would actually answer
Can I
that
just give you
question.
the positive? Because you gave your positive reason as to why that would be. So
Yeah.
mine would simply be that the very question of the nature of philosophy, that question, you need to have a reason for asking
Okay,
that question.
Rem, since you decided to grow up and actually engage, I'll actually respond to that. I'll respond to that absolutely. So
Okay, we're back to having a civil discussion apparently somehow.
the
Okay.
problem with that is that you're using a very ambiguous word, the reasons. But it sounds like you're presupposing that reason can only take the form of the idea or the concept. But if we actually treat the word reason with the full breadth of what it really means, which is more or less meaning, then
It has many
the
meanings.
definition you just gave would make philosophy indistinguishable from not only religion but also art and aesthetics and many other
Oh,
things.
absolutely. I think everything at its fundamental is philosophy for sure. Yeah.
No, what I'm saying is that you are not specific enough about why that's philosophy and not religion and not aesthetics.
Because all questions fundamentally require an answer to that question.
But religious, for example, the way in which religion deals with the question of meaning is very different
Hold
from
up.
the way in which
I'm not talking
philosophy
about
does.
I don't know what you're meaning by meaning.
Okay, reason.
Because
The way religion deals with the reasons for things is very different than
can I define
philosophy.
reason for you? Can I?
Okay, so this is I'm trying to follow along here. Infrared's position is that the definition of philosophy that Rim set out here is too broad and it encompasses all subject matter. So a religious person would be doing philosophy, a person doing art, an aesthetic person, aesthetics. I don't know what you call that. An artist, we'll just call him an artist. An artist will be doing philosophy of some sort. All of these things are related to reason if we're using that word so broadly, which is not a clear enough definition to actually have a narrow tradition. It's a meaningless word. It just means everything. It means too much. So that's an interesting critique, right? It's a usage of a word that's too broad. Fair enough. Okay.
I try to give just a
Okay,
definition of
go
what I
ahead,
understand.
define reason.
Okay, I would describe it because I think it's primitive. I don't think it can be basically reduced to anything more than this. It's basically something that counts in favor of something else. That's what reason is. Something is a reason for something if if it counts in favor of something being the case. So, for example, on the question of the fundamental nature of philosophy, we have to have a reason for ascribing value to that question.
Yeah,
And what would that
but
reason
but
be? Can
as
you
far
answer
as
that?
religion, Rem, but as far as religion is concerned,
Yeah.
even the definition you just gave of reason is still doesn't address my point. Even religion will deal with a reason for another reason.
No, but I'm talking about the very nature of reason itself, the structure of reason. I'm
Okay,
not talking about instances where you're
but
looking
when you
for reasons.
but here's the thing,
That's
Rem.
different.
When you I know what you're trying to say, Rem. It's not that I don't know what you're trying to say.
Okay. I don't know what he's trying to say. I'm gonna have to take that a second time. However, I got to pee first, so I will be right back. We're learning a lot about how people see reason and use these terminologies and such. So I'm interested in what Rim meant by reason. I didn't quite follow it. But we don't want to turn off the video just now. We've got some good stuff coming up. They're being more civil. Seems like they're actually both putting out positions and critiquing each other. It sounds kind of cool. We're actually doing a little bit of philosophizing. A little bit. Teensy weensy bit. I've watched it before. I watched a little bit, but I didn't watch all of it. And I wasn't paying attention. I was watching it in the background. It was more of a sort of passing entertainment. But then I heard like a couple of things that were like something that I thought would warrant me to listen to more deeply, more clearly, more specifically. I don't know what word to use, but I thought it would be worth me actually paying attention to a little bit. So that's why we're here. Okay, so we're trying to figure out what Rem means by reason. He said something very specific, and it was interesting enough, I think, but I didn't actually understand it. He said, first of all, that reason is primitive, and I think that means that you can't reduce it or explain it in any other way. But then he had like a very simple sort of definition. Reason. He has a very simple definition of reason. Okay, I'm just going to run it back
That question,
pretty far.
it counts in favor of something being the case. So
That's what it was. Reason counts in favor of something being the case. So it has something to do with truth, I guess. Maybe something being the case is not necessarily truth, but reason counts in favor of something being the case. What does that mean? And he's saying it's primitive, so he wouldn't be able to explain it any further than that, I'm assuming.
basically reduced to anything more than this. It's basically something that counts in favor of something else. That's what reason is. Something is a reason for something if it counts in favor of something being the case. So, for example,
Reason counts in favor of something else. Something that counts in favor of something else. Counts in favor of something being the case. Something counts in favor of something being the case, then it is a reason. Something counts in favor of something else. Okay, does that mean for arguments? Like if you have an argument and you have things that count in favor for that argument, is that a reason? Or does it expand to other things? I'm not sure. Can I imagine Infrared's family or significant other getting in an argument? Probably not pretty. Yeah, well, probably not. Probably not. Probably not.
on the question of the fun.
Maybe he's a nice guy. I don't know. I don't know why he's off stream. Maybe it's all an act. Doubtful. Let's hope he's a more wholesome off stream.
Fundamental nature of philosophy, we have to have a reason for ascribing value to that question.
Yeah,
And
but
what would that
but
reason
but
be? Can
as
you
far
answer
as
that?
religion, Rem,
For example,
I'm not
on the
understanding.
question of the fundamental nature of philosophy, we have to have a reason for ascribing value to that question.
Okay,
Yeah.
so he's critiquing Infrared's position at all for even suggesting that there is a fundamental essence of philosophy. That's not the word he used again. I'm not sure what word he used. There's some fundamental essence of philosophy. And he's saying that you need to give a reason for even thinking that that's an interesting question, or why do we even care about that? And since we can do that, since we need to ask what the reason is for that question, then that must suggest that reason is the most important part of philosophy. Okay, that's his position. Right, I'm following
What
along.
would that
but
reason
but
be?
as
What is
far
it?
as religion, Rem, but as far as religion is concerned,
Yeah.
even your the definition you just gave of reason is still doesn't address my point. Even religion will deal with a reason for another reason.
No, but I'm talking about the very nature of reason itself, the structure of
Okay,
reason. I'm not
but-
talking about instances where you're
But
looking
when
for
you
reasons.
but here's the thing,
That's
Rem.
different.
When you introduce, I know
Structure of
what you're
reason.
trying to say, Rem. It's not that I don't know what you're trying to say. I'm just trying to demonstrate to you that your definition is bullshit of what philosophy is. Because when you talk about structure and form,
Okay, so it sounded much earlier. Earlier, it sounded like Emperor was being very nice and charitable. Nice is not the right word. I said it that time and I caught it. He's not being nice. He's being he's seriously engaging with the topics. He's being charitable, and he's not trying to push his own position over other people's position or anything like that. But then he just called this BS for some reason. Though again, maybe he's not suggesting that it's BS because No, he said why it's BS earlier because he thinks it's BS because it's too broad and it refers to everything. Any sort of engagement in the world could be interpreted as a reason for something in favor of something else, or something in favor of something else. So anything that would happen in the world could be interpreted as a reason. In which case, the word is so meaningless. The definition of philosophy being so meaningless, it's so broad that it's kind of meaningless. In that case, it's BS. So I think even still, he's not being. He's not suggesting that his position is the most correct. He's just kind of trying to take down this one. Interesting. He's charitable to his own desperation for hyper-aggressive discussion. Interesting. UNEP, Global Diversity Assessment Report. Hey, Gloria, what's this? A reasonable estimate for industrialized world society at the present North American material standard of living would be 1 billion. I don't know what any of those words mean. Okay, let me try to interpret that. I don't know what UNEP is. Global Biodiversity Assessment. What is that about? Biodiversity, obviously, but I'm not sure what that... What is this? What is this, Gloria? Tell us more.
What you're really talking about is the... not even... I don't think the analytic philosophers even really deal with the idea and all of its breadth and all of its implications. But... what you are dealing with is some kind of form of thought, of pure thought, specifically.
Pure thoughts.
And maybe not even necessarily
reason,
thought.
but you're presupposing an answer to the question, because many people hold that reason is not something that's internal, but is something external to us.
It doesn't matter. It still doesn't address how it's different from religion or aesthetics. And I can explain why if you want.
I don't understand. So, okay, yeah, go ahead and explain, because the question of what reason is, it's a way of understanding how it structures our experience and how it structures our normativity and determining
not necessarily. No. Structure is something you're introducing. I don't know where you're getting structure from.
Structure is simply the way that we understand how reason.
This is why I attract 4 viewers. Hey, welcome 4 viewers. I'm glad that you're all here. I don't know if that's a praise or an insult. But I'm glad we have 4 viewers here.
Plays a role in our experience. That's
or on YouTube. How many on Twitch?
You're not dealing with reason. You're dealing with the understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand what you mean by that. Obviously, there's understanding.
The understanding and reason are not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but let me
don't check. It's bad
here, because for everything that you're saying,
which numbers are bad? I didn't know we have bad numbers out there in the world. I've never looked at a number and thought that's a bad number. What?
I can ask, well, why?
Oh, it's bad to check.
And you have to provide me a reason for that. So every question that you pose,
but Rem, there's more. What I'm
it.
trying to tell you is that there are experiences or mental states or whatever you want, or relationships to being that can be argued to be more fundamental than just conceptual thought, like a religious experience of
but you'd have to give
divine
me a reason
sublimity.
To believe that.
But as you've just pointed out, Rem, reason is always metonymic in the.
Ooh, so we had a. Oh, this is interesting. Communication is really impossible, isn't it? Oh man. Okay, so that was such an interesting exchange there for a moment, because it started with Rim saying that we're presupposing the contention here was that there's a presupposition that reason must be in the form of something internal rather than necessarily something. It could be something external. It doesn't need to be in the form of words or whatever. Reason can be anything else, right? And then Infrared says, well, then we can have like religious reasons. You can have a religious experience, which is a reason. And then Rim is saying, well, you need to give me a reason why that's a reason. So the Rim is not presupposing that the reasons must be spoken. It must be theoretically, philosophically languaged in some way. I feel like I'm saying that weirdly, but there's the presupposition that he was addressing earlier. It comes back, but he's doing it, saying that the reasons must be spoken reasons, rather than anything being the case, anything supporting the case for something else, which is fascinating. So it doesn't need to be a linguistic reason. It could be just a religious experience, or it could just be a work of art. So it can be an aesthetic thing, or it can be spiritual things. And all of these things are reason. And since reason just means anything, well, it's too broad of a term. This is Infrared's position. But then Rim says you need to give me a reason why that's a reason. Well, I thought we talked about it earlier. It doesn't need to be a intellectual, theorized, philosophical reason, spoken reason. It could be anything.
Sense that it's always going to have to refer to something else. So eventually the buck has to stop somewhere, and it's going to denote some kind of irreducible intuition that cannot be expounded into the form of a completely transparent, communicable, static form. It's something that, for example, can
Wow.
only refer and relate to a more fundamental.
So you agree it's
What a lucid communication. I want to hear that again because it sounded really nice.
reason to
sublimity
believe that.
One more time.
experiences.
Religious experiences
Okay,
could
but
be reasons.
but let me try to demonstrate what I mean here, because for everything that you're saying, I can ask, well, why? And you have to provide me a reason for that. So every question that you
Yeah,
pose
but
requires a
Rem, there's
reason
more.
as to why to
What
ask
I'm
it.
trying to tell you is that there are experiences or mental states or whatever you want, or relationships to being that can be argued to be more fundamental than just conceptual thought, like a religious experience of
But you'd have to give me a
divine
reason to
sublimity.
believe that.
But as you've just pointed out, Rem, reason is always metonymic in the sense that it's always going to have to refer to something else. So eventually the buck has to stop somewhere, and it's going to denote some kind of irreducible intuition that cannot be expounded into the form of a completely transparent, communicable, static form. It's something that, for example, can only refer and relate to a more fundamental.
So you agree it's a fundamental question of philosophy.
No, not necessarily, because philosophy is dealing with the question of reason and the understanding and so on within the frame of the Platonic idea. The Platonic idea is where the buck stops as far as philosophy is concerned. Like, for example,
But why does the buck not stop with reason if you acknowledge that that's irreducible?
because it's reason in the form of the idea.
Well, what does that mean?
Because if it's not in the form of the idea, then you have
What
not
does it mean to
separated.
be in the form of an idea?
But then it's not separate from religion, and it's not
No,
separate
no,
from.
but I'm just trying to figure, what does it mean to be in the form?
Infrared woke. I mean, he seems to know what he's talking about. He has a very good grasp of understanding these conversations. Yeah, fascinating to me.
Form of an idea, as opposed to what?
For example, as the form of an aesthetic sense, or as the form of a kind of religious consciousness, or a religious deep spiritual belief, something like that.
I don't understand how these things I just
I know, because you're not really an educated person, so I can.
Okay, then we go back to insults. So, wow, back to insults, right? So again, you can have other things that most people wouldn't traditionally call reason. It seems like even Rim is not calling them reasons. You can have a aesthetic sense, or you can have a religious experience, and those don't need to be considered reasons. They definitely aren't something that's, as you said, transparent and static and communicable. Right? They aren't things that you can just say, not necessarily. And it doesn't make, well, if we call those reasons, then everything is a reason, which doesn't really communicate any information. And if we were to be a little bit more narrow in our scope and call, deliberate communication with language reasons and kind of limit it to that area, and we allow for other things to exist that are also irreducible, such as spiritual experiences or aesthetic experiences or aesthetic senses, then we would then plainly see that not everything is a reason. Reason isn't the most fundamental thing for all of our reality or being or whatever, and probably not how we need to define our philosophy.
Well, no,
Okay,
I mean
fascinating.
you're saying that I'm using terms vaguely, but I would say that
Yeah,
you're
reason is an
referring to things incredibly
reason
vaguely.
does not only take one form.
How did I find this? I like watching Twitch streamers sometimes. So Infrared is a Twitch streamer. Also, Rim is sort of a Twitch streamer sometimes. He's not. I don't think he's streaming. He's not been streaming recently, but well, he streamed recently-ish because this is about a week old, so he streamed recently-ish. But they are both sort of vaguely adjacent to streamers that I like. And yeah. Rim comes from Destiny's community. If you're familiar with Destiny, I'm sure you are. So that's how I know Rim a lot. And Infrared and Destiny have met a couple of times. They kind of chat a bit. So I kind of branched out from there and engaged with these other communities and liked their videos.
Well, you've acknowledged that it's irreducible. It's a fundamental part of our experience, but you want to say it's not the most fundamental? There's something more fundamental than that?
You're saying reason is the most fundamental part of our experience? I don't. Okay, well, but by your own admission, reason refers to something beyond itself. Reason cannot
No,
have.
It could. But that's the topic of
But
investigation.
it always
there are
does. Whatever form you may isolate and call that reason, that form necessarily must refer to something beyond itself.
Well, no, if it's something that's purely no, but you've already acknowledged.
Okay, so can you tell me
if a product of intuition, so it can't. It's indefinable.
If something is irreducible from Rim's perspective, something irreducible and simply the product of our intuition, then it's indefinable, and that seems to suggest that it's one of the most fundamental things, or perhaps the most fundamental thing. Of course, the arguments aren't being extremely clear, so I'm following along, I think, but the arguments are being kind of cut off a little bit. People are talking over each other, and obviously there's the sort of context of them yelling earlier that makes it difficult for them to both place their arguments fully before, jumping into each other. So I'm sure there are more nuances to be had on both sides here, but fascinating enough here, we think that reason is the most important fundamental aspect of our being, of our existence, of our experience. That's what Rim said at least a second ago. On one hand, there is vague. On the other hand, there is arbitrary. This applies to other examples he went to. Religion, spiritual experiences, we can define these specifically, and we fall into the definition of being arbitrary, or we can give them open-ended and they'll be very vague. Oh, yeah. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be arbitrary if it's specific, but I think I understand what you mean here. You can be arbitrary, you can be vague. So Rim is giving a very vague definition, which is extremely broad, whilst Infrared is being a very arbitrary, specific type, narrow definition. Being alive is before reason. That makes a lot of sense to me. There are a lot of experiences that I would suggest are extremely normal that don't involve reasoning, at least not involving what I would call reasoning. So that's, I would agree with that, definitely.
It can't refer to something beyond itself.
I agree. I mean, no, it does refer to something beyond itself, and that very something is the object of the intuition.
But if it is...
Reasoning just refers to something else. Okay, so we have an intuition, that's something, and then you have the concept of reason, which is refined, and it's referring to that object of our intuition. So reasoning necessarily refers to something outside of itself, which seems to suggest that reason is not the most fundamental part of our experience.
The object of the intuition, then it's referring to itself.
It's not. What do you mean it's referring to itself?
You said to me that...
So it seems that Rim would, again, this is what was happening earlier. This is the exact same thing that was happening earlier, but it was happening outside of the system, right? So Rim was saying earlier that when people use the word truth, the philosopher comes and they take the usage of that word and they refine it. And Rim is not noticing or not considering that to be now creating two usages of the word truth. You have a really refined philosophical definition, which is different from the colloquial usage of the word truth. These are two different things. Rim did not recognize that. Rim sees them as the same. And similar thing happening here. We have an intuition for reason, and that's one thing. And then the philosopher is coming and defining that intuition and taking that and then refining from there and creating a new concept that's a philosophically rigorous concept of reason. And these are two different things. From my perspective, it seems like from Infrared's perspective, these are two different things. And the intuition would be the sort of primitive thing. But Rim is thinking that they are the same, right? When you refine a concept, the refined concept is the same as the initial usage of the word. From Rim's perspective. Okay, I think this is pretty interesting. This is kind of a fascinating parallel how that happened earlier, and you can see a sort of a fundamental thing that Rim is going through with his way of thinking about these topics. When you refine a word, he thinks that the refined word is the same as the initial subject of the refinement. Whereas I would say that they're different. And it seems infrared would be saying that they're different too. If you want an inclusive definition for philosophy, religion, spirituality, art, it necessitates being vague. Anytime we give these definitions specific enough, like Infra was doing, will necessarily exclude a multitude of people who identify and engage as philosophers from being philosophers. Yeah, but is that a problem? So yes, if you have a vague definition, you include everybody, but you don't need to do that. If somebody comes and speaks to me about what I think, I will give my position, my narrow position about my tradition. Right? If somebody asks me about tea and they say they drink chamomile, well, that's a tisane. That's herbal tea. That's not tea. That's herbal tea. That's something else. I define tea in this very narrow, specific way, and that's how I use the word. So if you're coming to me for my definition or my position, I'm going to define it narrowly, not the sort of vague, everything is tea, even soup is tea, rice is tea. That's not how I'm going to define the word, because that's not how I'm going to use the word. I'm not going to be so vague to include everybody, and I don't need to. I can understand that people use words differently, but when you're speaking to me and asking about my position, I want to be specific with this sort of narrow definition that I have, particularly, which in some senses could be arbitrary, but specific. You remember the day you learned chamomile wasn't tea, right? Right? But again, it's not tea based on certain traditions. Some people have a particular tradition and they define the words to mean particular things. Obviously, people who are herbalists, I think they generally consider themselves drinking tea or brewing tea. So from the herbalist tradition, then yeah, chamomile is tea. Okay, that's a different usage of the word. That's a different tradition. I think the problem seems to stem from the idea that one definition must reign supreme over other definitions. That seems to be the problem, right? Because if somebody asks me what I think music is, and I say something like music isn't emotional, I've talked about this before, right? If I say music isn't emotional, that's my definition of music. I don't think music has anything to do with emotions. But then that's fine if somebody wants to understand my definition. If somebody assumes that my definition must necessarily step on other people's usage of the word or necessarily negate other people's definitions and other people's using that label, then that's where we start a problem. Because then it matters if I'm being too vague or if I'm being, too specific or whatever, which is, I don't think that's necessary. I don't think. You don't need to, but not doing so, most people will be unwholesome. I agree with that, definitely. It's hard to have that balance, right? Of having your own position without stepping on other people's positions. Though you wouldn't necessarily have to be, many people would be offended and hurt. Uh-oh. If someone considers their being a tea drinker as an important part of who they are, and I reject that by saying that you're not drinking tea, you're drinking some other herbs. A lot of people would be hurt by that, and it wouldn't be. That would be great if it wasn't the case, but it is. Yeah, it is the case, definitely. But also the same thing happens in the opposite sense, right? If somebody gives a vague definition that's too broad and it's stepping on the specific definition, other people will be hurt by that too, right? If I say that anybody who identifies as a woman is a woman, now you have a lot of people who are more accepted and oh yeah, I'm a woman too. I can be a woman, and anybody can define themselves as a woman, or anybody who can identify as a woman. And it's oh, this is great. You're more inclusive. But then a lot of people feel alienated. No. I thought women was this thing that I was narrowly, and I feel threatened by having a broader definition of woman. That hurts me. So it works in both ways, I think. Not to get to, social, political, gender issues here. But that's another example of the opposite thing happening. If you're having a too broad of a definition, some people will get hurt by that also. So I think the only issue is when you step on the definition of somebody else. When you say that my definition of gender must override your definition of gender, or my definition of tea and tisane must override your definition of tea of tisane, or of tea or tisane. No. You have your tradition. I have my tradition. I define it this way, and when I use the word, I mean it in this way. If you define the word in your different way, and if you use the word, you define it in that way, and we can hopefully understand that. Hopefully.
That it's something irreducible and something that we just intuit, right?
I said reason is that?
Yes.
No, I said reason eventually has to stop. The buck has to stop somewhere in the chain of reasoning.
Okay, I don't mean reasoning as in like
It's all about how we present it.
rationality. I'm using reason in the form of counts in favor of.
What counts in favor of? That's
I've said that multiple times.
then
That's
you're
his
not.
definition.
If you're saying counts in favor of, it's not necessarily reason anymore. It's
Yes, yes. Rim, the guy on the phone, is saying that the finger and the moon are the same. Yes, the thing that you're referring to when you refer to something is the same as that is what is referred. Cow is not a cow, right? Concept of truth is not truth. That's what I would say. Exactly. That's exactly what I would say, right? They are different things. We can understand that they are different things. Rim is not respecting that. He does not have that distinction as a part of his way of viewing the world. It's not important to him, or at least it's just not a part of his system. So interesting.
more like
I'm not using reason.
verifiability. Then it's a question of justification and verifiability. It's not necessarily the same as reason.
No. Any question you ask, I can ask you a reason for asking it.
I know, but that's still not specific enough to define what reason. You don't even know what reason is.
Let me give you an example. You know modus ponens?
I know what?
Modus ponens.
No, what is that?
Modus ponens.
Weren't you
Is
accused
that
of you
1
not
equals
knowing
1?
basic
A equals
logic?
1. A equals A.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not a logic
Modus
board.
ponens is
Yeah.
like the basic logical axiom, which is basically if P then Q.
Yeah,
If
I don't
P-
deal with the PP stuff. I think that's just math. It's not really philosophy at all.
Have you read Science of Logic?
Yeah.
I don't deal with the PP stuff. That's just math. Okay, dismissing very, very well established parts of philosophy as math. Fascinating. All right. Again, this is a person who seems to know a lot about philosophy, but also says stuff like this. Wow.
You know Hegel deals directly with that.
With PP?
PP?
Deals directly with logical axioms and stuff like modus ponens.
But he
He even
doesn't
talks
deal with
about that.
he doesn't deal with the PP and the PQ and the QQ or whatever.
I mean, he might. Okay, so he phrases it in a different way, but
Yeah.
he
says it in a different way.
It's a logical axiom that we say. It's a rule of inference. Okay,
But he
So
doesn't
if
deal with it
something-
in this purely mathematical terms. Okay? That's analytic
I mean, I
philosophy.
wouldn't consider it Like, I don't think that these are mathematical terms.
I
They're
think it
just-
is. I think it's just mathematics.
Okay, then if something is the case, well, you understand what I mean.
I mean, mathematics is like the purest form of logic proper. So, I mean, I'm not saying there's something wrong
I
with
think
that.
you're using mathematics in a way that I don't use it. I think mathematics is at its root logic, not the other way around. But
Okay.
Mathematics is
I
logic.
don't care.
you-
It's just completely semantical point.
Okay, yeah, so I recognize that.
Okay,
So,
what's
but you
the
understand what I
significance of
mean.
modus
Hold on.
ponens?
You understand what I mean by when I say
Yeah.
if P then Q, okay?
Yeah.
If P is instantiated, then necessarily Q, right?
Yeah.
If
Mhm.
grass is green, or if it rains tomorrow, then the grass will be wet.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it's true that it rains, then necessarily, okay? So that's modus
but
ponens.
that's
You
not-
wanna
Modus
say that
ponens,
that's
okay.
a structure.
That's not specific. That's actually that's too specific to be what reason is, okay?
I'm not defining that as reason. I'm not.
Okay.
I'm giving you but that's something that we want to say is necessarily true within our way of experiencing the world, for example. Or for example, we can't experience
No,
something that is both.
you're not describing the way we experience the world. You're describing only the logic itself. You're not actually talking about something as very sweeping and broad and deep as experience.
Are you a dialetheist?
Sorry?
Do you think we can experience something as being both the case and not the case?
It depends on what you mean by that.
Can we experience something as being both the case and not the case? Oh boy. Yes? In some cases, for some things.
I don't know what you mean.
Do you think we can experience something as existing and not existing at the same time?
Can we experience something that is both existing and
Yes and
not
no.
existing?
Yes and no.
At the same time.
At the
It
same
depends on how we define existence. If we
How
define
do you define
existence,
existence?
so for example, to me,
I think that's something that's
Yeah.
not definable.
I don't know. Well, to me, for example, my conception of the existence, I'm a dialectical materialist. So for me, every existence is latent, is kind of pregnant with its own development and becoming, and thus inevitable inexistence and sublation into a higher existence, for example. So it's a difficult question what you're actually asking me.
What is
Do you think
existence?
do you think you can experience, okay, example, do you think you can experience an object like a cup being both red and not red at the same time?
My cup is red and silver at the same time. Does that count?
Can it be both red and not red at the same time? Let me think.
Yin yang stuff. Someone in the comments. Wow. Interesting.
Kind of from a maybe transcendentalist, like Kantian perspective.
Are we doing koans now? Pretty much.
I have no idea what
It's actually not really easy to answer that question.
I mean,
right off the top
Kant
of my
would,
head.
for example, never say that that's possible at all. Kant would say that that is a complete, that the very idea of that transcends
Why
the
would he
bounds
say
of human
that?
experience.
Why would he say that? Because for
the
example,
principle of contradiction is something that he takes
but
for
you're not
granted.
talking
He
about
states that
you-
explicitly.
listen. The principle of contradiction is about A is A. The principle of contradiction is not about something.
Sorry,
as
non-contradiction, whatever
The
you want to call
the
it.
principle of non-contradiction is
Something
not.
cannot be both the case and not the case at the same time.
Yes, but when you bring experience into it, you're opening up a whole new can of worms.
No, but
When you bring
Kant's-
up experience and existence into it, you're opening up a whole other can of worms
have you read
than the
Kant?
principle of non-contradiction. Yes, I have.
Okay, so then you know that he derives the pure categories of the understanding through a transcendental deduction. Okay,
Yeah.
and part of this is going to be that you can't experience an object in the world. When we form a judgment about something in the world, an object, okay, we can't premise it with two things that are contradictory to one another. That's a
read Spark
necessary
Notes.
condition for
Yes,
human
but
experience.
when you bring, for example, can you experience the cup as red and not red at the same time?
Yes, Kant would say no.
Can
No,
something be real and unreal at the same time? Can you experience derealization? Where you're really feeling it, but it feels unreal.
but that you haven't actually demonstrated that based on what you've said.
Well, the
Kant
whole
just
point is
says
that
no.
you can't really demonstrate it because a demonstration of that fact, you demonstrate it by
Like, for
essentially
example,
saying that
where
it's
does
reductio,
redness
which is
come
how-
from? Where does the redness come from?
Red, again, that's an indefinable thing that we experience. That's not. But this is the whole point. This is the whole point of Kant's project, is to investigate, well, what are the necessary conditions for experience in the first
Like
place?
on the one hand, reason I'm saying this is, on the one hand, you are experiencing the structure you through some kind of transcendental structure. The
What
cup
do you mean by transcendental structure?
through the way in which the world is structured transcendentally.
Well,
That didn't
Through
explain.
that-
I don't know what that means. Like,
I didn't
Kant
explain
doesn't ever
anything.
talk like this, so I don't know what you mean by this.
Okay, so for Kant, I don't know if you've ever read Kant, and maybe I should
Yeah, I
explain it to
have
you.
very
Yeah,
much.
no,
So.
you really haven't.
I have.
Yeah,
And we can
so
have a whole
for
game of-
Kant, for Kant, the world is actually mediated by the categories of experience. which-
categories of pure understanding.
Yes, the categories of pure understanding and the synthetic a priori.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just
Yes.
calling that the transcendental structure, the transcendental what is the word, screen, if you will. If you have any familiarity with the history of philosophy, it's actually pretty common language, actually.
Okay, but
Okay, actually,
no,
common.
talking about the transcendental structure, because there's a transcendental stance that we can take towards objects in the world, but that's very
Okay,
different
so for
than
Kant-
the type of empirical standpoint that we take.
Yeah, okay, listen, Rem. I'm gonna say this slowly for you.
Say it
For
slowly.
Kant, is our experience of the world structured, or is it just a pure empirical experience?
I've already said that it's structured by the necessary.
So why are you
conditions.
taking why are you taking
I was
qualms
just
when I
trying
say
to clarify what you meant.
why are you having a problem when I'm saying something that any real Kantian would just understand exactly what I'm talking about when I say transcendental structure? What's the issue?
Sorry, someone donated. No, the issue is that I don't ever recognize Kant as speaking in that way. If you want to cite me a
So
place
that
where-
just means you can't even put it into your own words. You can't even recognize someone putting it into their own
no,
words.
it's called you use terms in a way I didn't recognize. And
Okay, interesting. I can't tell who's winning on this part. They need to remind me who's dunking on who on this part. I don't know who's winning. I'm drinking just water. No, I'm cleaning. I'm cleaning right now. I drank earlier. I'm cleaning. And I'm trying to find a good end point so we can wrap up the stream. I can leave. Got some things to do. I had this. Okay, so who's winning in this part? I'm not sure what's happening here. Who's winning in this part? Is Infrared successfully putting all the things in his own language, in his own words, which is something that a person may do if they understand Kant very well, or is he just misusing the terminology? He just read the Spark Notes and he doesn't understand anything. I'm not exactly sure how to read this in this case. I don't know how to interpret what's actually happening right now. I don't know who looks good or bad here. They both kind of look bad because they're kind of, fighting in this sort of posturing type of way. But who's actually making a good point? I'm not entirely sure.
Kant certainly didn't use it that way, so I was asking you to clarify it.
But
as conversations work.
like Kantians talk about this Kantians use it in this way all the time.
Who? What Kantians?
I mean, I couldn't name them off the top of my head, but I'm familiar.
Can you name a single Kantian right now? You accuse me of being educated.
What do you mean? Wait, hold on. No, that's not true. What about
What about Henry Allison?
I'm not familiar with him. Who is the
Who's the
neo-Kantian?
Alice?
No, the neo-Kantian from the late 19th century.
No, I think this is a clear win for him right now. He's making Infrared think a lot, and it doesn't seem like he has a very clear, quick understanding of Kantians, which I'm not sure if this is something that a philosopher should know instantly, but he's trying to, think of a philosopher, and he doesn't seem to be doing it very quickly. So it does seem like a good win for Rim, at least optically here. Very clever and devious of Rim to get into established philosophical concepts. Yeah, like modus ponens. Yeah, makes him look foolish. And he's getting angry. He also did get angry. Yeah.
Century who reinitiated Kantianism.
Green.
Neo-Kantianism.
Bradley.
Was it Bradley?
Green or Bradley?
Dang.
Yeah, F.H. Bradley.
And Rim is like, he's just going up all these names. He just said like 5 different names, and Infrared didn't pick up on any of them. Ooh, not a good look. The tables have turned.
Bradley?
F.H. Bradley.
F.H. Bradley?
Husserl was a Kantian.
No, it was not. It's not. Not Bradley. Fuck, what is his name? He was German, I'm pretty sure. Or he was French, either German or French. He was not English. I forgot his name.
Can't name a single. But do you find it?
I mean, I can name Kant, like Habermas is a Kantian. There's plenty of Kantians I can name. It's just that I'm just saying, like, if you're familiar with Kantian literature, neo-Kantians, whatever you want, it's not.
Well, I am, but that's why I'm asking. Can you give me examples of people who use it?
If you name people who talk about Kant's philosophy,
yes,
you will find it's very common that you're going to find this type of language.
That's what I'm asking for example.
The transcendental structure. Zizek will use the word transcendental structure. I'm pretty sure he uses that.
Zizek is not a Kantian.
It doesn't matter when he's talking about Kant and he's very familiar with Kant. He will say that. It's not controversial.
Listen. So getting back to the topic at hand.
This is a big shift. Like I really thought Infrared was like way on top for like all the conversation. But now it just sounds like he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just talking about Kant and a couple philosophical terms like modus ponens, and like I don't know if Infrared has read anything about any of this stuff at all. If either of them were familiar, they would know that Kant is pronounced like more like the rude lady parts. Yeah, interesting.
When I was talking about modus ponens, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kant would say that this is a necessary.
No, wait, but I'm responding to what you're saying. So let me respond. Now that we've gotten over this thing about transcendental structure, which you've decided to drag on for no fucking reason, even though you know what I was talking about.
Okay.
So when it comes to the transcendental structure, we cannot actually speak about what the cup or its color really is. We can only speak about it as it is mediated by our transcendental structure.
No, that's a misreading of Kant. Kant actually wants to say that the only way
only way we can talk about the world.
Yes, that's the only way we can talk about it, but
It's
that doesn't.
empirically.
But that does not speak about its existence in itself. That's
Yeah,
the
of
issue.
course, but the whole point of Kant is that to ask those types of questions is absurdity. It's not even something.
I know, but just because you're not asking the question doesn't mean it doesn't have relevance as far as existence is concerned. So existence is a very
Existence only
loaded
has
word.
meaning from the empirical standpoint. That's Kant's whole point.
But existence doesn't only have to have meaning, because for Kant there is a thing in itself that is completely unknowable to us.
Which exactly.
It's
The fact of
100%. And if it's 100% unknowable to us, then who am I to say that it's not possible that the cup is not actually red? I can't. I could never know that.
You have this is a butchered understanding of Kant.
Why? Explain.
I mean, because
Wow. This is completely turned around. Okay, I gotta go very soon, so I'm gonna try to look for a sort of ending point somehow at this. Rim definitely winning this round, 100%, like completely destroyed. We gotta have people in chat remind us who's winning at a particular time. So, our friend Infrared does not look like he's at all following this well. He's not on board. This is a total loss.
Like I would call myself a dual aspect interpreter of Kant, and I read Kant as essentially arguing that
justify why you read it that way, by the way.
Well, sure. I mean, if we look at the way that Kant uses the terms like transcendental object or the thing in itself, he uses these words in epistemic ways as epistemic conditions, not as something that is ontological in a certain sense.
Well, how can you justify that?
Kant.
I would love. So you're trying to make Kant like a rationalist. So how can you justify that?
Well, not as a rationalist.
Yeah,
He's an
because
idealist.
if you remove the thing in itself as
you're not removing the thing in itself.
If you remove the metaphysically charged, if you remove the fact that the thing in itself is metaphysically charged and it is actually referring to the world outside of our possible knowledge, and it's actually referring.
But then
to
you
that.
Listen. I want to interpret Kant as charitably.
I don't
possible.
care. What do you mean as charitable? Why would Kant say the thing in itself as just the necessary conditions of knowledge? He is speaking about the precise limit of knowledge. So he is referring to a threshold beyond knowledge. He's not allowing us or permitting us to speak about it or have knowledge of it, but he is acknowledging that threshold is there.
Yeah, right. And that's the whole point. So anything that we want to define and talk about in experience has to be done from the empirical standpoint. So existence itself is
but
going
you
to be
cannot
rendered
but
on the
by
empirical
okay
ground.
But if the thing in itself is unknowable to us and that this is the threshold of our knowledge, then what exists,
then that entails that we can only talk about it
but just because that's all you can talk about doesn't mean you can say with certainty that that's all there is. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay,
they're two different things.
That all we can ever say.
Yes,
all we can ever say.
But that doesn't mean you foreclose.
How are we going to say anything other than that?
Because Kant is fundamentally agnostic. That's all you can say, but he's not making claims about what it is in itself. He's just saying this is all we can say. He's refusing us.
The entire point.
Interesting. All we can say is the empirical somethingness, but like there's more potentially. They switched arguments though. This is fascinating. Okay. A little bit of an analysis on infrared. If he wanted to establish dominance, he should have not continued to engage with this playing field, not having enough knowledge, because he doesn't seem to have enough knowledge here. Or maybe he does, but doesn't seem like it at least. He couldn't dominate here, so it might have been, he might be right, okay, but he's not skilled enough to dominate like he wants to. Better for his ego to not succeed in being dominant. Interesting. So I kind of read it in that same way, but when you put it in that sense, it may just be the case that he's actually really engaging with these ideas and not trying to be, the way that we read him earlier, it seems like he's just trying to win the debate, but maybe he's actually trying to fully engage in the debate, and he will probably, potentially, just engage in anything, whether he knows it or not. He's trying to fully engage with the topic, potentially. But okay, interesting. Just because you say about philosophy doesn't mean that's what philosophy is. Just because you say that about Kant doesn't mean that's what Kant is saying. I don't think that's the second, but I don't think that's his position. Well, it seems that infrared is... What's happening here? Rim is pointing out that we can only say... We can only use our faculties of empiricism to say things about the world. But infrared seems to be thinking that Kant is suggesting that there's something outside of that which we can't say anything about. So is there something outside of what we can directly, empirically experience in our faculties of reasoning? Does that refer to something outside or not? That's the question here. And Rim's interpretation is saying that there's nothing outside, and infrared's interpretation is that, yeah, there's something outside, but we can't say anything about it.
Yes,
Right?
he's not allowing us to speak about what it is in itself.
Then
but
why do you keep trying to talk
because
about
so
it
we
in
are
that
not
way?
allowed. Then we are not allowed to say that the content of our experience is all that exists. We are not allowed to say that. Kant is not a solipsist.
No, but the entire point is that we essentially we can look at things from the transcendental perspective, right? And we can derive the pure categories of the understanding and whatnot. Okay, we're done that project, right? We can't go beyond that. We recognize, okay, so everything that we have to do, we have the pure categories. So everything that we want to say about the world is going to be bounded by human subjectivity and our conditions for experience.
Okay, but
so
Rem,
everything that we now say is going to be an empirical investigation. It's subject to these causal
yeah,
laws.
but with
It's
an
subject,
exception.
It's
With an
subject
exception.
to something like modus ponens.
Wait,
the
but with an
exception?
exception.
What's the exception?
There is no exception.
Yes, there is.
Where's the exception?
Rem.
We can't
Rem,
talk
wait,
about
Rem,
anything
Rem,
other
Rem,
than
Rem,
the
Rem,
Oh,
automatic
okay.
You claim to know.
What's the exception? He didn't say it directly. He's building it up a little bit. All right, I'm excited for this. Okay, Rim, wait a second. You don't know the exception? Wait. You haven't heard about this? You've read Kant before, haven't you?
know anything about Kant, and you don't know that Kant's whole point is that we, in our experience, must acknowledge that there is an object of both our knowledge and experience that we could never possibly experience.
Let me ask
And
you something.
we must acknowledge that.
If we don't know anything about the object,
Yeah.
how are we saying anything about it?
Because the only thing we can know is that we don't know.
Ooh.
I thought we don't know anything about
If
it.
we don't know anything about the object, how can you say that you know anything about it? He finds a good angle. Yeah. You see a complete change in the demeanor, right? Complete change.
We don't. That's why it's formless. That is why it is
Okay, no, but you're
fundamentally.
okay.
That is
can't
why it
say
is
both- you can't
fundamentally.
say two things. You can't say these two things at the same
Yes,
time.
Paradox. We're paradoxing this out of existence here. Kant cannot say these two things, that there's something outside of our knowledge that you don't know, but we know enough to say that we don't know it. You can't say that. If you don't know anything about it, then you don't know anything about it. You don't know that you don't know. That's a paradox, because you know something.
you
can't say
literally can.
Simultaneously, we can't say anything about it, and also, oh hey, let me say something about it, and here's that.
Which is
thing.
that we can't say anything about it. That's
Okay,
the whole
so if we
point.
acknowledge we can't
Dude,
say anything
that is
about
the
it,
whole
then
point of-
anything we want to talk about in the world,
Dude,
is
that
going
is
to be done
literally the
outside of
whole.
the
That's the
transcendental
whole
standpoint.
point of the Kantian.
Ooh, and another good point from Rim. If you acknowledge that you can't say anything about it, then anything that we say must not be that, right? Because we're saying anything about it. So anything that we can talk about is within the purview of our empirical reasoning. So there's nothing outside of our reasoning, because if we say anything about it, then it's within our purview of reason. Okay. Big turnaround here. Rim taking it for the ending, I think. I think this is a good slam dunk
That's why
here.
it's the Kantian thing. The only thing we can say about it is that we know nothing about it. That doesn't mean we can say with certainty that the only things that exist.
Certainty is going to be defined within the empirical standpoint. The
No,
game of doubt
you don't
itself
understand
goes to
that
certainty.
Kant's position is agnostic. It means we can never be fully certain about anything. That's why Kant says that the whole aim of his philosophy is to reconcile the the religious feeling within and the starry
Kant
heavens
did
above.
not say, like, you're viewing Kant as this hyper pessimist.
He's
But
not a. I didn't say he's a pessimist.
he
I said
builds
he's
from
an
the ground
agnostic.
up. He
I said,
acknowledges that that's why he has his whole argument for the existence of this
okay,
categorical
what is
imperative,
the name
the
of Kant's?
necessity of
What is the
human
name of
will
Kant's
and freedom.
seminal work? What is the name of Kant's seminal work?
The critique of pure reason, the critique of practical reason, the critique of judgment. I mean,
Yeah.
I knew that. We all know the 3 books of Kant. Okay. All right. I think that's a clear loss. I'm sorry, Infrared. This did not turn out well. This completely turned around. I was 100% on his side at the beginning. This completely turned around when we brought up Kant. Oh no. Okay, I gotta go, guys. So we can't continue with this, but I'm just gonna take that as a big L for Infrared, at least at the ending. And at least optically, I don't actually know anything about Kant or anything. So, well, we got to end there. But here, let's look at something wholesome. I don't know if this is particularly wholesome, but I typed in wholesome videos, and this is the first thing that came up. It's a baby crab eating potato chips. It's kind of wholesome, right? It looks a little scared for some reason, but capturing animals and feeding them junk food. Okay. Well, if you put it in that way. When you say it in those words, okay. Doesn't sound as good. He's enjoying himself. Look at that. Wow. It's really hard to read the emotion of a crab. It looks like it's scared, kind of, but it also looks like it's kind of comforted. I can't really tell. Anyway. I'm not Zhuangzi, so I don't know whether the crab is happy. Zhuangzi, how do you know that the crab is happy or not? You can't read crab emotions. But you can't read my emotions in my mind, so how do you know that I don't know that the crab is actually happy? Oh, but you don't know that I don't know that we don't know that other people don't know that crab's emotions are very clear and transparent. So how do you know that I don't know that you don't know? Zhuangzi silliness. Okay, guys, I gotta be back on Monday. So I will see y'all then. Until then, please take good care of yourselves. You don't want to eat any junk food like this crab here, but maybe eat something healthily, and sustainable or something. I don't know, whatever things you like. Make sure that you're happy as you're doing it. Can you even know of your own happiness? You can't read the happiness of other people. How do you know your own happiness? Well, I don't know. All right, I'll see y'all then. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.